So many questions, so few answers. Can people truly change? Even if given a lifetime and the best reasons in the world, can people change? More to the point, can Ivy change? That's the real question in my mind as I look at her. I'd spent probably half of my life in love with this woman. She'd broken my heart twice, but on the heels of the greatest tragedy in my life, she stands before me asking for a third chance to hurt me. A big part of my heart tells me that I still love her in some capacity. It also tells me that though I love my wife more, life goes on. Should my life go on with Ivy, though? Can I take the risk? Would you? I think that from the very first moment I saw her, I was in love with Ivy, but also a little afraid of her. Maybe it's because I'm a bit more attuned to the mysterious powers that truly run the universe than the average guy. Maybe it's because I've already been burned twice before. But now as Ivy stands before me promising to be with me forever, my mind is telling me to get the fuck out of here once and for all. Another part of my mind is saying, yes, do that, get out of here, but fuck her first. I should mention, though, that no part of my mind is saying take her up on her offer. My heart, though, is another matter. Let's go back near the beginning of our sad little tale, and maybe you can understand my reticence to be with this goddess made flesh. I remember the first time I saw Ivy. I was in my first year of teaching math at our local community college. Ivy was in one of my remedial math classes. At 26, she was a bit older than my regular students, but not by much. For that matter, I wasn't much older than my students either at 24. I was actually a lot younger than some were. It was more than Ivy's age, though, that made her stand out from the crowd. It was everything about her. Ivy, to put it simply, was a goddess among women. Okay, you're already thinking about this the wrong way. Right now, you have this tall, willowy blonde with big hooters going through your mind, don't you? Well, put away your preconceived notions and get back to reality. Ivy is barely 5 feet tall. She's nearly flat-chested, and her hair is dark. Her hair alone could take weeks to describe. It is one of the most incredible things about her. It's very long and very thick. It's shiny and full of natural waves that seem to tumble over her shoulders and down her back nearly to her ass. Her hair seems to have a life of its own and often moves or swings in punctuation of her sometimes abrupt head movements. Ivy's eyes always appear to be laughing, whether she's happy or horny or pissed. I think God made them that way, to let us mere mortals know that this woman simply will not put up with not having a good time. Her nose is a mere button that was probably slapped in the center of her face as an afterthought. Ivy's lips are simply incredible. They're so full and pouty that they could be artificially enhanced, but no collagen has ever been injected into them. When you look at her, you can just imagine what it would be like to have those lips sucking on your... Anyway, those lips are also very expressive. I often found myself getting lost in them while I tried to teach about fractions or elementary algebra. Ivy is, as I mentioned, very small up top. She often lamented her lack of breast size, but I really think she was the only one. Her nipples are incredibly sensitive and get very hard with only a nasty thought. Her waistline is small enough that you can put both hands around it, but from there down, it's weird. Rational men can see that God has a hellified sense of humor. He often does things like giving women with the biggest natural tits the absolute flattest asses he can, and vice versa. In Ivy's case, it almost looks like her top half and bottom half came from two different women. Ivy's ass is massive and almost geometrically perfect in its roundness. The term bubble butt was coined just to describe it. Her thighs are full and round, but taper down to tiny ankles and feet in a very graceful way. How the hell they got legs that long on a woman who stands barely 5 feet tall is one of the mysteries for the ages. I can't explain it, all I can do is appreciate it. Ivy's voice and laugh are like bait. Her laugh is infectious and melodic, and she uses it a lot. Her voice is likewise neither high-pitched or deep, but so melodious she may as well be singing. Ivy could get rich as a phone sex operator. But again, if you're picturing a very cultured vocal pattern and very sophisticated delivery, you'd be surprised because Ivy curses like a mule skinner or a sailor. A little past the 4-week point in the semester of that first class that I taught with Ivy in it, I was torn. On one hand, most of the students in my class were passing it, but on the other hand, a very few were not. Ivy was one of ones who was not passing. She and I spoke often, and as I said, I was in love with her from the beginning despite the things I'd heard. I'd often catch Ivy staring at me while she was supposed to be working her problems, so I was sure she'd at least given me some consideration as well. There was, however, no way I'd even think of putting my job or ethics into question by having any kind of relationship with a student, though. I also knew that in a lot of cases, mutual attraction between a student and their instructor magically vanishes when the class ends. I guess Ivy thought about me a lot more than I thought she did, though, because she came up to me one evening after class was over. I'd packed my books and papers into my book bag when I noticed that Ivy and I were the only ones left in the room. "Did you know that there are no rules in place in this school that would prevent you from going out to eat with me?" she said, breaking the ice. "Did you know that you're not even close to passing this class?" I asked in response. "What the hell does one thing have to do with the other?" she asked again. Then she let out the most musical laugh I'd ever heard. It was as if mere mortals laughed with their lungs and their vocal cords, but Ivy laughed with her entire soul. She tilted her head back with that leonine mane of hair twitching with every syllable and just laughed. "Do you think I'm trying to get you to go out with me to boost my grades?" She laughed. "Here, look at this," she said, handing me a sheet of paper. Early registration had started that morning, and Ivy had signed up to take the class all over again. "I suck at math," she laughed. "I'm trying my ass off, and I'm doing better in your class than I ever have in any math class ever. But I didn't think I'd pass it. I was expecting to take all of my math classes twice." "Oh," I said. I had the feeling that I had just blown a golden opportunity. I had spent a considerable amount of time lately jacking off to thoughts of Ivy, yet when she approached me, I'd just ruined the possibility of it ever happening. "Shit," she said, still smiling. "I really fucked this up, didn't I? I guess I'm not psychic after all. I've been sitting here all of this time thinking that you liked me and were just too shy to do anything about it." She looked at me again, as if she was analyzing me. "I guess it's a case of transference, huh?" "A case of what?" I asked. "Transference," she repeated. "In psychology, we learned that people sometimes think that because they feel a certain way everyone else does as well, or sometimes just specific other people. I guess I thought that since I like you so much, you felt the same." She stood up, she said this, and started walking towards me, her cropped top and incredibly tight jeans outlining her body with every step. The closer she got to me, the more I wanted her. It was amazing to me the effect she had on me while fully dressed and in public. "Are you sure you don't want to grab something to eat with me? Maybe just as friends or to discuss what I can do not to fail your class twice?" she asked in a teasing little voice. At that moment, all of those creatures from Greek mythology and the Sci-Fi Network finally made sense. I was the incredible two-headed man. One of my heads was telling me to get as far from Ivy as humanly possible. Meanwhile, the other head wasn't saying shit, but it was hard enough that I could have driven nails into concrete with it. "I'm kind of hungry," I heard myself say. Ivy followed me to the parking lot, chattering cheerfully the whole way. She told me about how she thought that she should follow me to the restaurant so she wouldn't have to come back and get her car. She was embarrassed by her car, a 20-year-old Chevy S10 truck, but she intended to get a newer, more environmentally friendly vehicle as soon as she graduated and started making more money. She was awed by the fact that the university urged its staff to drive environmentally friendly vehicles like Professor Morton's Toyota Prius. "Why are we stopping here?" she asked. I pulled out my key fob and opened the door of my 09 45th Anniversary Edition Mustang GT. The car with its twin-screw supercharger put out over 500 horsepower. It has 19-inch Hilo T's black rims with a custom body paint matching rim around their periphery. The oversized Shelby brake calipers had been painted to match the body panels as well. All of the car's lights were blacked out, and the windows were tinted as dark as legally possible. The car was a monster. How is this environmentally friendly?" she asked, tapping a tiny foot on the concrete. "Shit, Ivy," I said, smiling. "The whole car is painted green. And it's got a row of leaves painted like they're lying across the hood and the door panels. You simply cannot be more earth-friendly than this. In fact, my car's name is—" She smiled even bigger and looked at me. The look was so enticing that I forgot what I was saying. "Those aren't leaves," she said. "They're ivy, and if you wanted me lie down and spread on your hood or any other place, all you had to do was ask." That conversation set the tone for our entire friendship. Notice that I used the word friendship, not relationship. Ivy and I had a great dinner at Texas Roadhouse, and we ended up sitting in the swing on my porch for a long time. She even called her babysitter and paid her a little more to stay with her kids longer. But we did not have sex. I was pretty sure that we could have. But believe it or not, it was me, not Ivy, saying no. We'd spent the evening just talking. I don't think I ever had a more pleasant conversation with anyone in my life. We talked about everything we could think of. We got along perfectly. By the end of the evening, we were sitting there in my porch swing, wrapped around each other and holding hands. With that amazing ass pressed up against my dick that was harder than a cylindrical diamond, Ivy raised her lips to mine. When I moved away, she smiled, but I could tell she was disappointed. "Ah," she said, kissing my hand instead. "You can't tell me we're still only friends after all of this. This has been the best date of my whole life." "Mine too, Ivy," I said, "but you're really special and I don't want to mess it up." "Ah," she said again, "you are so sweet." She gave me one last hug and started for her truck. As I watched Ivy's amazing hindquarters gently shifting their way down my driveway towards her truck, I felt my chest to make sure her nipples hadn't drawn blood when she hugged me. She turned around and caught me staring at her ass and smiled. "Last chance," she said. I shook my head and said, "Nope," feeling like a fool. "Don't worry," she said from the window of her truck. "You'll have plenty of other chances." After that night, Ivy and I started seeing a lot of each other. She was the sweetest woman I'd ever met. She had a heart of gold and would give anyone the clothes off her back. I was sure that Ivy might just be the woman I wanted to marry. On the other hand, we hadn't had sex yet, due mostly again to me. I had trouble reconciling my sweet and wonderful friend with what I'd been told about her. Once I started dating her, people came out of the woodwork to tell me about her. Some of the things they told me I already knew. Ivy had told them to me herself. There were other things, though, that just don't often come up in polite conversation. I knew that Ivy was 26 years old. I also knew that she had 3 children. Her oldest daughter, Jasmine, was 10, and she had another daughter, Rose, who was 7, and her son, Michael, was 5. She'd also already told me that none of the kids had the same father. She was constantly going to court with this guy or that to arrange payment for back-owed child support. Ivy worked in a grocery store during the day and went to school 3 nights a week. 2 of those nights were spent in my math class, and Ivy was still failing. Actually, she was doing worse than before we started dating. She told me one night that she'd changed her math class next semester into a different section so she'd have another instructor. When she saw that I was hurt, she told me that I could tutor her, but there was no way she could go through this twice. "Go through what twice?" I asked. "Ivy, you don't have to go out with me." "I know that, silly man," she said. "I'm not talking about your teaching. You're a great teacher, but unfortunately, you're a better boyfriend. When I come to class now, I can barely concentrate. I just want to sit there and stare at you and imagine us fucking. But I know we're not going to until I'm out of your class because of your ethics." I just smiled at her. I was shocked that she thought of me as her boyfriend. That statement alone would launch a few loads of jism into my sheets tonight, true or not. "But seriously, Tim," she calls me Tim because that's my name. "I'm not sure I should be telling you this yet, but I think you're the man I'm supposed to settle down with." Other students started coming into the classroom, so she came closer to me and whispered her next statement softly. "Just think, as soon as I'm done flunking your class, every part of me will belong to you. You'll be able to do whatever you want to me, whenever you want to." Before I could say anything back to her, she turned and walked to her seat. I put a few of the problems from the chapter on the board and told the students to solve them before the lecture. I walked around the classroom looking at what my students were doing. I helped a couple of them that were stuck, and corrected a few who had the wrong answer or had used the wrong method to solve the problems. When I got to Ivy, I dropped a note on her desk and walked right by. I'd written the note when I assigned the problems. It was very short, only 3 little words and a name. "I love you, Ivy." I looked back at her a few minutes later and saw that she was doing one of those bizarre things that only women and rodeo clowns can manage. She was smiling and had huge tears rolling down her cheeks at the same time. A few minutes later, she gathered her things and ran out of the classroom. I was puzzled and, to be truthful, a little bit upset. I wondered why she'd left and if she'd come back. I guess in a very real way, I was torn, the same way I am right now. I guess I've always been confused about Ivy. It took me a long time to realize that with Ivy being what she is, I can't judge her the way you judge normal women. The pagans and many other religious sects worship an earth deity. This goddess is on one hand benevolent and makes the plants grow and brings gentle rain to provide water, yada yada yada. But on the other hand, that same bitch brings tornadoes and hurricanes and volcanic eruptions that devastate the planet and kill many of those same plants and small animals. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Ivy was the same. On one hand, she was my sweet, kind, gentle, and loving friend. Notice I didn't say girlfriend. That whole girlfriend-boyfriend thing was Ivy's words. I'd never asked her to be exclusive. You're viewing things the way she did through girl logic. Girl logic is the way that women view things. It is not an exact science. It isn't based on any logical or rational set of rules or laws, and it morphs constantly. In Ivy's mind, we were boyfriend and girlfriend because she thought we were. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Yes, Irie Bob. I had just passed her a note saying I loved her. But shit, I love Eva Mendes too. But it doesn't make her my girlfriend. I love my Mustang more than I love most people, but it won't make her human. Love has its limits. I did and do love Ivy. She's just as beautiful and just as sweet and wonderful as I've described her. But she's more like that earth goddess than a woman. On one hand, she's the sweet and kind woman I've described. But on the other hand, my Ivy is probably the biggest whore I've ever known. Ivy will probably fuck any guy who looks at her. I'm always amazed at the sheer volume of guys who come up to me and tag me on the back and tell me how lucky I am to be fucking Ivy. It made me feel like I was part of some worldwide fraternity composed of men in every country and every city on the face of the earth. Our only connection is that fact that somewhere or somewhen, we've all been lucky enough to glimpse that special view of heaven that is visible only between Ivy's thighs. But in my case, it's like I'd stolen my membership card because I hadn't been there yet. Ivy herself has, in her honesty, made no secret of the fact that she loves to fuck. Most people do, and I've read enough articles to know that no matter how much pussy a guy has had, he'd have to probably triple it to come close to the number of dicks his wife or girlfriend has had. There are probably a few exceptions to this rule, of course. There are some women who stayed relatively pure until they got married. But let's face it, the average woman can have sex with nearly any man she wants just by letting him know she's willing. Ivy, on the other hand, puts them to shame. Ivy and I have never talked about the number of people we've been with. But if even a quarter of the things I've heard about her are true, she probably has her own category in the Guinness Book. She's done it all: gangbangs, sports teams, and every kinky thing you can name or imagine. To be truthful, unlike what Ivy thinks, it isn't any sense of ethics that's keeping us from having sex. It's a combination of things. First, I'm intimidated as to how any normal male could ever please a pagan sex goddess. And even if I did, how long would it be before I was just another notch on her sexual gun belt? She obviously has big notches and little ones. The small notches are just names somewhere in her memory. The really big notches are the ones she'll remember for at least 18 years while she chases them down for child support. I really did love Ivy, but I just couldn't see any kind of future for us. I'm a one-woman man, and I needed to know that my woman was the same way. I just didn't think that Ivy could be that girl. In fact, despite all of her talk of love and all the rest of it, I was sure that Ivy was still fucking guys left and right while we were dating. I remember picking Ivy up from the store she worked at one Saturday morning. We squeezed Ivy, myself, and all three of her kids into my Mustang. Luckily, all of her kids were small. I'd picked up the kids first while Ivy worked the early morning shift. When I went into the store to get Ivy so we could have a picnic in a nearby state park, she was trying to settle an argument between two of the store's janitors. They were about to come to blows because one of the guys had used the other's special mop. The way that Ivy calmed them down and the things she said told me a lot about her. "He knows it's your mop, Steve," she told one of the guys. "But all of the mops were bought to keep the store clean, so if you weren't using it, someone else may as well use it." Then she very affectionately elbowed him in his side and said, "Right?" The man had smiled and nodded right back at Ivy, and I knew then and there that he had fucked her, and probably intended to again. The look on his face also told me that he expected to relatively soon. I guess I'd been thinking of Ivy as my mop, but clearly it didn't matter how much I cherished her. In her mind, anytime we weren't together, anyone else could use her. That kind of put things in perspective for me. I left the store before Ivy saw me and got back into the car with her kids. Jasmine, Ivy's oldest daughter, leaned into the front seat as usual to talk to me. "Tim, what did my mommy have to do to be your girlfriend?" she asked. "Who told you that your mom was my girlfriend?" I asked her. "Everybody," she said. "My grandma even said she hopes that mommy can stop being a hoe so she doesn't lose you." "Jazz, Do you know what any of that even means? I asked, hoping that the little girl was shielded from the details of her mother's sex life. She nodded her head seriously. If mommy loses you, can I be your girlfriend? I'm not a hoe. I think I'm a little old for you, Jazz, I said, just as Ivy sat down in the car. Who's a little old for Jazz? Asked Ivy, smiling. Does my girl have a boy in her sights already? And speaking of being in someone's sights, Marcia told me you were in the store, honey. You should have come and waited for me. She reached out to kiss me, and I pretended not to notice. The picnic went great that day, except for the fact that I avoided spending any time alone with Ivy. What I'd seen in the store started me thinking about the true nature of our relationship. I guess it made me think about where I saw us going and how. I truly loved Ivy, more than I'd ever loved any woman in my life at that time, but I suddenly realized that things could never work for us. My plan until then had been to ask Ivy to marry me as soon as the semester was over. I'd even started seriously looking at and inquiring about engagement rings. I guess in my mind, since Ivy often told me that I was the only man she was dating, and also the only man other than their fathers that she allowed around her kids, that it meant something. Now I saw that though she hadn't lied to me, my own foolishness had put ideas in my head. I thought that since she wasn't dating anyone else, that she wasn't fucking anyone else either. Silly me. When most of us go to the dentist, we know that it's probably going to be painful. We go anyway because we know that in the long run, short-time pain is better for us than a more serious health problem. That's why I went to Ivy's store the next day while she wasn't working. Marcia recognized me and came and told me that Ivy wasn't working. I told her that I was planning something for Ivy and needed some help from the two guys who worked in the back. Marcia told me to go on back and see Dave and Steve, but not to stay too long because they hardly ever did any work anyway. Dave was sitting in the back on a stack of crates. I knew he was Dave by the name tag on his shirt. "Hey, Dave," I said. He nodded at me. He knew I seemed familiar, but he couldn't remember where he knew me from. "I need to ask you a question, but I need you to keep it between you and me," I said. He nodded again. "How long have you been fucking Ivy?" At first he got nervous, but when he saw that I wasn't upset, he just smiled. "About 3 years," he said. "It started the first day I came to work here." "Has it slowed down any in the past 2 months?" I asked. He thought about it for a while as Steve joined us. "Actually, I think I'm getting more now," he said. "More what?" asked Steve. "I've been getting more pussy from Ivy these past few weeks," snapped Dave. "If it's any of your business, how about you? Do you think the truck drivers are getting more too?" I just walked away as they started arguing. "You dumbass," I heard Steve say. "That was the guy she wants to marry. Why would you tell him you were fucking her? Now we all might get cut off." "Don't worry about it, guys," I told them from the doorway. "I have no intention of getting anyone cut off." I left the store with an empty hole in my chest where my heart used to be. I went and saw the dean of my college and asked him if it was too late to change my mind about accepting the job teaching algebra at the state university. Originally, I'd turned the job down even though it meant more money and more prestige because I didn't want to leave the area in Ivy. He told me that as far as he knew, they still didn't have anyone, and he was pretty sure the job was mine if I wanted it. I told him that I did, and he made a phone call. After he got off the phone, he told me that I could drive up to the state capitol and meet with them the following evening. I reminded Thin that I had class tomorrow evening as well. He told me he'd have someone cover my class. I thanked him and headed for my evening class. When I got to class, Ivy was standing in front of the door waiting for me. I opened the door and started putting problems on the board. She and the other students filed into the room and took their seats. Class went as usual, with Ivy sitting in the front row staring and smiling at me the whole time. When I walked around the room helping students work their problems, I sat down next to her. "You really should try to work some of the problems so you can pass next time," I said. "I hope your next instructor treats you better." She looked at me with a funny look and stopped smiling. "Tim, in my whole life, no man has ever treated me better than you do. Remember that note you gave me last class?" She opened a heart-shaped locket around her neck and pulled out the note. It was folded very small so it would fit inside the locket. "This is the exact same way I feel about you," she said, smiling again. "Do you know that I think about you all fucking day long? And my kids love you too, Tim. Even Jasmine does, and she doesn't like anything or anyone. That girl doesn't even talk to her own father, but she talks to you." "I love her too," I said. I had to try really hard not to cry while class was going on. Somehow, though, I managed to make it through the rest of the night. In the last hour of class, I reviewed everything the class would need to know for the final exam the following week. They all cheered when I handed out a take-home practice test that would show them the types of problems they'd need to know how to solve for the final. "So where are we going?" asked Ivy. "Ivy, I have to get up very early tomorrow. I have to drive up to the state capitol for a meeting. I'm sorry it just came up," I said. Her face exploded in a smile. "That's what you've been so down about?" she asked. "Look, silly man, I told you that I love you. One day apart isn't going to hurt us. We're going to be together forever. Walk me to my truck." She started laughing again. "You really had me scared for a while. You had me thinking you were about to give me the speech all of my girlfriends get when a guy doesn't want to fuck them anymore." "Haven't you ever gotten that speech yourself?" I asked. She looked at me as if I'd just asked her the silliest question in the world. "I've never had a man not want to keep fucking me, for any reason," she said. "But you'll find out yourself soon enough." She was smiling at me like a shark smiles at a smaller fish. I walked Ivy to her truck, and as she got into it, I turned and walked towards my car. "Aren't you forgetting something?" she asked. "Sorry, goodbye, Ivy. I'll see you when I get back," I said. Then I got into my Mustang and drove away, leaving her puzzled. The next day, I was given a tour of the much larger state university by the head of the math department, Dr. Colleen Bennett. She was a beautiful woman. She was very tall and slim. She had nice boobs and seemed to want them to be seen. We had a pleasant conversation while we walked. She asked me about my career plans and liked my answers. She told me what the job paid and told me that they had several candidates they were considering. She said that most of the other candidates either had no teaching experience or too much teaching experience and not enough pure math education or experience. So if I wanted the job and could let her know within a reasonable amount of time, the job was mine. "Is now soon enough?" I asked her. "You're hired," she said. "When can you start?" I noticed that she was touching my arm even as she asked me this. "I have one more week of classes to teach and then grades to submit. I'd also need to close up my house and find a place to live in this area. So I'd say 2 weeks. Is that reasonable?" "Do you have a wife or girlfriend that you'll be bringing with you or making arrangements with?" she asked. "No, it's just me and Eartha," I said sadly. "Who's Eartha?" she asked. "You'll meet her soon," I said, smiling. "Is she pretty?" she asked again. "Beautiful," I said with a tone in my voice that implied love. As we got to the parking lot, Colleen's mood was more subdued. She wasn't talking nearly as much or touching me either. "I was going to offer to help you get settled in or close down your house," she said sullenly. "But I guess Eartha can do that." "I don't think she does that kind of thing," I said, smiling. "But why don't you ask her?" "What's her phone number?" she asked flatly. "The same as mine," I said. "But why do you need a phone? She's right in front of you." Colleen exploded in laughter. "Eartha is your car," she said. "What did you think she was?" I asked innocently. Colleen agreed to call me and come down on the weekend and bring brochures for apartments near the university and some that were on campus. During my drive back home, I was lost in thought. First, I thought about the games I could play with Colleen. She was a very pretty woman. She was, in fact, far more beautiful in the conventional sense than Ivy would ever be. But if you put the two of them next to each other, most men would prefer Ivy. It was like comparing a Barbie doll to a real woman. Even though visually the doll had all of its parts in the correct ratio for maximizing its sex appeal, it would always be only a plastic approximation of a real woman. Colleen was tall and slim with nice breasts, but Ivy just exuded life and sex from every pore. Most men would run over Colleen to get a chance to kiss Ivy's ass. I also thought about the other comparison. Ivy was simply not capable of being the kind of woman I needed, but Colleen might be. Eventually, Ivy and I were going to have that talk, the one where I confronted her about fucking other guys, and she'd either lie to me and say she didn't or she'd stop for a while. But in either case, I didn't think I would ever be able to trust Ivy. I just didn't want to spend my life wondering when she was going to start fucking other guys. The best thing for both of us would be a clean break. I got home sooner than I expected. I decided that I needed to talk to Ivy face to face and seriously try to explain what I was feeling and what was going on. Maybe we could work something out. I drove over to Ivy's mother's house to ask her if she could watch the kids while I took Ivy out to a nice sit-down dinner at a grown-up restaurant. I guess I thought that at least this way she'd know that I'd always been honest and upfront with her, and we could end things the way we started, as friends. As I drove onto the block, I didn't even slow down because I noticed that Jazz and Ivy's other two kids were already there. Maybe Ivy was working. I called her cell phone and it went straight to voicemail. I decided to leave Ivy a note to call me when she got in. As I pulled into Ivy's driveway, I noticed that her truck was there. I stepped up onto her porch and started to ring the doorbell. As the bell rang, I looked into the living room and saw Ivy. She was sucking some guy's dick like it was the last lollipop on earth, and she had a sweet tooth. She looked towards the door as she heard the bell and our eyes locked. For that second, the world moved in slow motion. I noticed exactly how special Ivy's body really was. Everything that seemed disproportionate when she had clothes on wasn't. She was simply perfect. In fraction of a second, I was both more revolted and more aroused than I'd ever been at the same time. In that same second, Ivy saw me, and recognition flared at the same instant as regret and despair colored her face. Her eyes enlarged and her jaw dropped. She tried to form words, but the only thing that came out was low moan. None of that mattered, though, because I simply turned and headed back for my car. By the time Ivy got to the door, I was already gone. She stood there naked on her front porch, crying her eyes out. Before I got to my house, my phone started ringing. I knew it was Ivy, so I just turned the phone off. I loved Ivy with all of my heart, and what had just happened should have shattered me, but it didn't. I turned on my car's stereo and heard David Lee Roth screaming, "So this is love," into the night. Eddie's atomic blues guitar riffs and Michael Anthony's overpoweringly soulful bass line framing the emotions that were running through my mind. I laughed into the darkness and sarcastically sang along with Dave. I know it makes no sense, but I was happy as hell. This was, in fact, the best way for this scenario to play out. It was pure serendipity at work because any other way, and I'd never have been able to leave Ivy. I simply loved her too much. I know what you're thinking out there. How can he still be in love with a whore? Ivy was actually worse than a whore when you get right down to it. Whores at least get paid or get something out of it. Ivy just fucked anything that walked because she liked it. To be truthful, I had realized a long time ago that the normal rules did not apply to Ivy. She was like some kind of pagan fertility goddess. Trying to judge her by the same scale we use for most women wouldn't be fitting. At the same time, I was the kind of man who needed and demanded absolute fidelity from my partner or wife. We would never have lasted. At least this way I got to leave with my head held high. I wasn't leaving because she'd cheated on me. We weren't married or engaged. She was free to do whatever she wanted to, and she had. At the same time, she knew when she saw me in that window watching her that things between us were over, and it was her fault. It was the best of a bad situation for both of us. I could move on to a more normal woman. I probably wouldn't care for her a tenth as much, which would give me some kind of control in the relationship. Ivy, on the other hand, could go back to fucking as many guys as she could schedule. She'd make up in quantity what she was losing in quality. The next day, I was getting the test papers readied for the finals in my classes when my teaching assistant/secretary came in to see me. "Tim, you have a couple of visitors," she said. "Tell Ivy that I'm busy and I'll see her in class," I said. "If it had been her, I'd have told her that you weren't here and not even mentioned it to you," she said. "Like I've done both times she came to see you. It's a little girl and an old lady." I stepped into the hallway and saw Ivy's mother and Jasmine. Jazz ran over to me and hugged me. "You're not coming to see us anymore, are you?" demanded Jasmine. "I hate her. I knew she'd drive you away from us too." "Jazz, what are you talking about?" I asked. "No one did anything wrong. I'm just taking a new job and I'm going to live a bit farther away from you. So I won't see you as much, but I'll call your grandma and give her my new phone number. And I promise that you can call me every day if you want, okay?" "Okay," she said. She'd stopped crying but was still upset. "Jazz, go wait for me in the car," said Ivy's mom. "Thanks, Tim," she said after Jazz left. "My stupid daughter told me what really happened. How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said, smiling. "Tim, Sally Erickson from the jewelry store, is my best friend. I even know which rings you were narrowing down to figure out which one to buy for her. You don't have to act brave and cheerful for me, she said. God, that girl is stupid. Then she followed her granddaughter out. I sent Ivy an email that I hoped would settle things for us. In it, I thanked her for her friendship and all of the good times we'd shared. I told her how I'd loved every moment I'd spent with her. I explained to her about my new job and moving to a different city, and how I wished her well. Lastly, I told her that it wasn't necessary for her to come to class on Tuesday to take the final, because even if she got 100% on it, she couldn't pass. Her other test scores were too low. On Saturday, Colleen drove down to my house to help me pack and close down my house. Her long auburn hair was tied up into 2 ponytails. She had on the shortest shorts you could imagine, and those long legs of hers were shown to their advantage. She had a pale blue blouse on with the first 3 buttons undone. I kept getting glimpses of cleavage. Several times during the day, that 4th button came undone, and she'd smile and rebutton it. It seemed to take her longer each time to do it. While we were closing my shutters over the windows, I thought I saw a truck pulling away from my driveway back onto the highway. I was sure it had been Ivy, and she'd come to discuss the email I'd sent her. Colleen left me a couple of brochures with apartments she'd picked out for me to look at. I told her that during the middle of the upcoming week, I'd drive up and look at them. Monday's finals went well for my classes. My Tuesday daytime class did well also. I was looking forward to my Wednesday morning class, because it was my last one. Then I had only to grade all of the papers with the help of my TA, post the grades, and move on into my new life. I guess I'd overlooked my Tuesday night class because the thing that had always made that class special for me was Ivy. Since she wouldn't be there, it would only be another final. I truly thought about letting my TA give the test, but decided that it would be more professional to be there to say goodbye to my class. I was totally unprepared when Ivy stepped into the classroom and sat down in her seat. She stared at me and her magic started to work. I looked at every girl in that classroom, and though several of them were prettier than she was, none of them affected me like she did. Her eyes, as red-rimmed and swollen as they were, bored into my soul. Even though she looked like she'd been crying nonstop for a week, my dick was as hard as it could be and still get blood through it. After the test began, she pointed to the hallway. I shook my head. She walked forward as if she wanted to ask me a question. In the tiniest little voice, she said, "Either you let your assistant watch the class and come into the hallway with me, or I'll just start talking about our problems right here and right fucking now. Which would you rather have?" "How about if you let me finish my class and I'll talk to you afterwards?" I asked. "How do I know that after the test you won't just walk away and leave me sitting here?" she asked. "Ivy, in all or the time that we've known each other, have I ever broken my word to you or been dishonest with you in any way?" She shook her head, and a few tears fell. "Then I deserve the benefit of the doubt now," I said. She sat down in her chair with her head down and stared at me the rest of the class. Her eyes never left me. She gave me the impression that if I at any time even looked at the door, she'd tackle me to prevent me from leaving. Finally, the last student turned in his paper and started talking to me as he got ready to leave. He'd liked the test and wanted to talk about the parts that had challenged him. "Look, Poindexter, as thrilling as your observations on the test are, wouldn't it be better for you to email them to him so he can save them and share them with all of his future students?" said Ivy. Her voice dripped sarcasm. "And you," she said to me after he left, "we have a night ahead of us." She nodded her head as she said it. "No, Ivy, we don't," I said seriously. "I promised you we'd talk, but that's it, so talk." "Just like that, just start talking?" she asked. "It seems like you've already heard what I'm going to say and dismissed it already. Why can't we go somewhere comfortable like our swing and just talk our problems out?" "Ivy," I said exasperatedly. "Oh, that's right. You and your new girlfriend already moved our swing into your garage," she said. "She's not my girlfriend, Ivy," I said. "She's my new boss." "No, Tim, you're her boss," snapped Ivy. "I could tell from halfway down your fucking driveway that bitch wants to fuck you. She kept bending over and flashing her big titties at you, like it was an accident. She had 8 accidents in the 2 minutes that I watched you." "I really didn't expect this from you, Tim. Do you know how I feel about you? I've never felt this way about any man, ever. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "You have a really funny way of showing it," I said. If this is what you call love, I'd rather be hated. We have nothing tying us together. We're not married, we're not engaged, and we never asked each other to be exclusive, Ivy. So you didn't do anything wrong and neither did I. We're only friends. Bullshit, you fucking liar, she snapped. You told me you loved me. I felt it and I believed it. And I love you too. I almost died when I looked up and saw you through that window. But shit, Tim, it didn't mean anything. It meant less than nothing to me. Everyone I know is telling me how stupid I am. My mother and several other people even think you wanted to marry me. She looked at me to see my reaction. Oh my God, you were going to ask me, weren't you? I nodded my head and a fresh set of tears fell down her cheeks. Please, Tim, she wailed. I'm so sorry. Please give me one more chance. I swear to God, I'll find a way to stop. No, Ivy, I said quietly. It's just the way you are. It's as natural for you as breathing. If you did stop, you'd only start up again and I'd find out and we'd go through this all over again. Or you'd start to hate me somewhere down the line because I stood in your way. It's better this way. But Tim, everyone else just fucks me. It's only sex. I've got 3 kids and not even one of their fathers ever loved me the way you do. You make me feel so special. When I look at you, I can see love. I won't get over that, ever. Goodbye, Ivy, I said. I kissed her on her forehead and left her sitting there in the classroom crying. Over the next 6 years, my life changed a lot. I married Colleen and finished school. I finished my master's and started working towards my PhD. My marriage to Colleen was very good. We were best friends until she died of complications from a sudden stroke. The doctors did all they could to repair the damage, but didn't hold out much hope. She lingered in the hospital for 2 days, clinging to life. I never left her side. Finally, when she couldn't hold on anymore, she thanked me for a great life together and told me she loved me. And she was only sorry that she hadn't given me any babies. Maybe I could have had my own daughter instead of borrowing someone else's. I was shocked. She told me that she knew all about Jasmine and the way I still called her, and went to every one of her school functions like she was my own daughter. I also never missed her birthday or Christmas. Finally, Colleen told me that she'd always known that I had never loved her the way I loved Ivy, but that what I gave her was more than enough and had made her a very happy woman. I looked at her to see what she was going to say next and realized that she was gone. Despite what Colleen thought, I had loved her. Maybe I didn't let myself go as much with her as I had with Ivy because I feared being hurt that badly again. It took another 6 months for fate to intervene in my life again. My former boss retired and I accepted the position as dean of the math program at the community college. I moved back into my house and took my time doing it. In the 4 days that I'd been back, the only person who knew I was back and visited me was Jasmine. At 17, she had all of her mother's best features and then some. She was just slightly taller at 5'2". Her ass wasn't nearly as big as Ivy's, but it had the same wonderful shape and she had much larger breasts. She did have her mother's beautiful hair, and that way of looking at a man and making him forget not only what he was saying, but what he was thinking as well. She was going to make some man very happy someday. That Saturday night, I was almost to the point where the house was livable again. I heard my porch swing squeak as if someone was swinging in it. At first, I figured it was probably just the wind, but I heard it again, so I decided to see what was going on. Jasmine, young lady, I told you that I didn't want you walking around at night. There are too many nutcases out there. You may not be my real daughter, but... I stopped in mid-sentence as I noticed that it wasn't Jazz sitting on my porch swing. She was a little bit bigger in the waist and had a few more lines on her face, but it was Ivy. She could have been, you know. She could have been your real daughter, and we could have made a couple more. I wanted you so badly, Tim, she said. Sometimes there's a difference between what we want and what we need, Ivy, I said, sitting down next to her. I heard about your wife from Jazz, she said. I hated her for taking you away from me, but I'm sorry for your pain. Colleen didn't take me from you, Ivy. You pushed me away. Sorry, but I'm just not cut out to be a part of a crowd. I play very well with others, but I just never got the hang of sharing my playthings. We never would have lasted, I said. Bullshit, she said. I would do anything for you. Anything. It would not have been easy for me back then, but I'm older and smarter now. She patted the seat next to her on the swing. Tim, I'm only 32 years old and you're only 30. We have most of our lives ahead of us. The past 6 years have not been good for me. Letting you go was the biggest mistake I ever made. I look at a lot of my friends. They're all married now with husbands who drink too much beer and do stupid things and love them so much it hurts me to look at them. Do you know that I get jealous when some fat woman tells me, "Oh, I can't go in there. My husband would never allow that." Ivy had tears running down her cheeks. As if that wasn't bad enough, do you know how it feels to go to a party where there are a few drunk guys who get grabby? Even drunk, they know not to feel on Terry's ass because Bart will fuck them up. Or not to look at Linda's tits because Steve will clean their clock. But all of the drunk guys and even the sober ones or the crazy ones can practically rape me, and no one gives a fuck. I phrased that completely wrong, didn't I? Everyone gives me a fuck, but no one gives a damn about me. I have 6 kids, I've slept with so many men, I can't even remember most of them, and no one will take me out on a date or to a party, she said. A lot of my married friends' husbands fuck me more than they do their wives, but I don't have a husband of my own. Her voice was getting louder and Yus was openly crying. My mother was right. I had one fucking chance. One man who loved me so much that he would have done anything for me. One man who wanted to marry me even though I had 3 kids, and I fucking blew it. Tim, do you know that you're the only man who ever took me out on more than one date? You're the only man who ever actually took me out just to be with me. You're the only man who spent more than 10 minutes with me without fucking me. I'm more of a joke than anything else, she said. Maybe the people around here just don't realize how special you are, Ivy, I said. She just tilted her head back, and there it was again. Despite the ravages the past 6 years had wrought on her body and face, her voice and that laugh were still as magical as ever. How the fuck am I special? She asked. The only person who ever thought I was special is you. She got up and started pacing across my porch. How many days have you been back? She asked. Today makes 4, I said. When did Jasmine find out you were coming back? She asked slowly. She knew last week, I said. She was waiting for me when I pulled in. She didn't tell me, said Ivy. I don't think she wanted me to know you were back. She doesn't like me anymore. My own daughter thinks of you as her father, and not only blames me for driving you away from us, but is ashamed of me. What about you? She asked. What do you mean, Ivy? I asked. Don't fuck with me, Tim, and don't play any fucking mind games with me. I can't take it, she screamed. For 6 fucking years, you've gone to every fucking play that girl has been in. You've watched every volleyball game and art show she had. You've never once missed her fucking birthday. Anytime she needs a quarter, you send her a check. You've also been to 4 of Michael's baseball games this year. I love my son, but Tim, he's not a good baseball player. Even Rose knows you're never going to miss her birthday. I guess you don't really know my youngest kids, but you'd probably be more involved in their lives than I am too. What I want to know is, have you ever once asked about me, Tim? Is there even a ghost of a chance for us to be friends again? Do you still love me? Honestly, Ivy, I don't actually know how I feel about you, I said. As I watched her face fell, and despite myself, my heart went out to her. Please, Ivy, let me explain this to you. She'd begun to get up, but I took her hand and pulled her back on the swing. It seems like a lifetime ago, but it was only 6 years ago that you and I met, Ivy. Whether you know this or not, I almost instantly fell for you. You probably also don't remember this, but when I left, I was ready to propose to you. You could have been one of those married women you talked about already. I sighed and looked at her. I loved you so much it was crazy, I said. She muzzled herself into my arms and looked up at me. I never stopped loving you, she said softly. I just laughed. What the fuck is so funny, she snapped. I'm not the one who ran out and left you after a mistake that you never had the chance to talk about or explain. I'm just the one who had someone tell her he loved her, but he wasn't ready to let her even try to save things between them. I'm also not the one who ran off to another city and married someone else. I never gave up on us. I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to marry anyone else. Ivy, over the past 6 years, yes, I got married. I tried to make a life for myself. It was a disaster. Colleen and I should never have been more than friends. Part of the reason for that was that I never really gave myself the chance to get over you. I should have let myself be miserable for a while. Then I should have gone through that period of time where I hated all women. Then finally, instead of hating all women, I'd have reached a point where I only hated you. But I didn't. I jumped straight from loving you to trying to love Colleen, and in the end, she realized that she couldn't compete with you in my mind. She was goddamn straight about that, said Ivy. No, Ivy, I said icily. She was wrong, as wrong as she could possibly be. Colleen was beautiful. She was prettier than you are. She was more loving than you are. She was a hell of a lot more caring, and I could trust her. In the real world, she was a far better person than you are, Ivy. But she was competing with my fantasy version of you. No real woman has a chance against a fantasy. Ivy, you and I were together for 3 fucking months. We barely knew each other. It's really easy to keep the intensity going in a relationship when it's fresh and new. It's a lot harder after 5 or 6 years or more. You and I never even had sex. That was your fault, Tim. I was ready to fuck you the first time we went out. But you built me up to be some untouchable angel in your mind, said Ivy. I'd rather have a woman I can put on a pedestal than one I have to keep on a leash, Ivy. So let's do the math here. Math, after all, is what brought us together. I moved away. We'll leave the reason I left out of this. I moved away and got married to someone else. That means that for the last 6 years, I've slept with one woman. Over the same time period, Ivy, while you were so in love with me, how many men have you slept with? Ivy didn't say anything, so I continued. You have 3 more kids. Darren is 5, isn't he? That means that less than 3 months after I left, you were already fucking some guy and pregnant. None of the 3 kids have the same father, so we can prove that you've been with at least 3 guys since I left. And we know that there have been more than that. Probably a lot more, I said. You seem to be upset because I got married. You've been with more than enough men to have gotten married, Ivy. I can't believe that you were just sitting there, on all of that ass waiting for me. You never knew whether or not I'd have ever come back here. Why didn't you just go ahead and get married, Ivy? You obviously have reached the point in your life where you want to be. She mumbled something so low I couldn't hear it. I did hear the bushes moving beside the house, but I figured it was the wind. I'm sorry, Ivy, I couldn't hear you, I said. Nobody fucking asked me, okay, she snapped. You always saw me as being something special. To everyone else, I was just the town slut. Everybody wants a piece of my ass, but you were the only one who wanted the whole thing. We all know I'm a slut. I have never ever told any man no. In my entire life, only one man has ever told me that they loved me, and unfortunately, he's the only one I never fucked. She started to leave again, and again I pulled her down. Where are you going? I thought you wanted to talk, I said. You don't get to just leave because you don't like the way the conversation is going. Why did you come over here if you don't want to talk, Ivy? I asked. I wanted to see you, and I guess I was hoping. She paused. Why did you come back here, Tim? You could have gone anywhere. Why come back here? You're right, Ivy. I could get a job anywhere. But to be truthful, I never quite got you out of my mind. I'm only a bit less angry at you than I was when I left. But we're going to have to get over that because we don't have a choice. Our daughter deserves to have a life, Ivy. And I intend to make sure it's a good one. In order for that to happen, you and I are going to need to get along. There are a lot of marriages where the husband and wife stay together for the kids. You want to marry me? She asked in shock. Ivy, I didn't say that, I said. When I left here, Jazz had become kind of attached to me. I thought that it would be wrong for me to be just another man in your life who befriended her and then moved on. I gave her and your mother my phone number before I left. Jazz started calling me almost immediately. I thought it would last for maybe a week or 2, then she'd move on. We've never been out of touch. I know that she isn't my biological daughter, but I don't think I could love her anymore if she was. Jazz is 17, Ivy. I want her to go to college and learn to drive and all of those other things teenage girls do. I want her to turn up her iPod and ignore me when she gets mad. I want her to come and ask me about what I think of the boy who wants to take her to her prom, and I really want her to come to me so I can kick his ass if he tries anything with her. I want to be the one to walk her down the aisle when she finally says yes to the guy lucky enough to get her. So you only came back for Jasmine? She asked. Well, there is something else that someone has to do, I said. What's that? She asked. Someone has to teach Michael how to catch and how to swing a fucking baseball bat, I smirked. Tim, be serious, please, she said. You and I had something really special going. I know that I fucked it up. But I'm older now, and I know what I want. I'd give anything for one more chance. I promised that you'd never regret it. Ivy, it won't work, I said. We just don't want the same things in a relationship. It's better if we just stay friends and know our limitations. Tim, I'm ready to change, and I'm more than willing to change for you. How do you know what I can or can't do unless you give me a chance? If you really loved me and were willing to help me, I swear to you that I could be faithful to you. Just please give me a chance. She got off the swing and got down on her knees in front of me. Please, Tim. We'll start out as friends, I grumbled. Until then, you can do whatever you want to do. But if we move up to the dating stage, then you know what I'll be expecting. I want us to start at the dating stage, she said, and there'll be a few things that I'll be expecting. Like what? I asked. Tim, I have a very high sex drive. I'm not some nymph, but I kind of need to be fucked a lot, at least once a day. If I miss a day, it gets bad. If we're together, you won't ever have to worry about me fucking anybody else as long as you keep up your end. But if you miss a couple of days or so, I become very vulnerable. Ivy, how do you even know whether or not I'm any good in bed? I asked. Oh, you will be, she smirked. Practice makes perfect, and you're going to get a lot of practice. Over the next few weeks, Ivy and I saw a lot of each other. I just dropped by to visit her and the kids, and we did things together. Having 6 kids is really rough. Ivy's mother was a saint to have worked so hard to help her make it. Ivy's house was simply too small for the brood. I hoped eventually that we could move Ivy and the kids into my larger home. My house was larger and had 5 bedrooms and an apartment over the garage. Ivy and I had talked about how we'd handle it if we did ever move in together. My idea was that Ivy and I would have the master bedroom. Michael, as the oldest boy, would have a room to himself. The other 4 would each go 2 in each room. Jasmine would have the garage apartment to herself. Ivy, of course, disagreed. She said that she and I would take the garage so we could have all of the alone time we wanted away from the kids. Jasmine could have the master bedroom. The rest would be the way I said. She didn't want Jasmine to be able to sneak her boyfriends in and out of the house without us seeing them. I laughed at that for a long time. When she gets pregnant, we need to at least know who it was, damn it, said Ivy. I laughed again. There's not much chance of that, I said. The pill isn't failure-proof, said Ivy. Trust me, I know. But you obviously don't know Jazz, I said. She took the chastity vow 3 years ago on her 14th birthday. She intends to wait until she's either married or engaged. Ivy looked at me as if I was crazy. Why did she do that? She asked. Ivy, don't you ever talk to her? I asked. Remember when she was 10, almost 11, and I told you that she didn't talk to people much? I told you that she talked to you more than she did her real father. I smiled and nodded. Jasmine chooses who she wants to let into her life, said Ivy. When you left, Jazz blamed me. We don't talk much anymore. I was hoping that with you back, we'll become closer, but it might not happen. That's one of the reasons that I'm so glad to have you back in my life. The friendship only lasted a few weeks. Ivy took the bull by the horns as usual and said, let's go out to a nice restaurant. When I didn't immediately answer, she snapped at me. I saw your paycheck stub. You can afford it. They're paying you the big bucks to do practically nothing. Okay, Ivy, I said. I'll meet you at Texas Roadhouse after work. Fuck that, said Ivy. You have to come and pick me up. You have to bring me flowers and wear a suit. I'm going to squeeze my big ass into a dress that's so tight that everyone will be wondering whether or not I'm wearing panties. And when I lean forward, they'll see that my titties are small. Ivy, do all of your friends have to go through this? I asked. That friendship bullshit is over, Tim. This is a date, she said. Up until that point, Ivy and I had gone out to eat a few times, but had done nothing more than hug each other physically. I was sure she was still doing what she did, but we were only friends, so it was none of my business. Ivy, are you sure? I asked. You do know what this means? In answer to my question, Ivy took my hand and stuck it down her pants and inside the elastic of her panties. You do know what this means, she moaned, as I felt how wet she already was. You won't have another chance at this, Ivy, I cautioned her. You can have as many chances at this, she said, pressing my fingers into her vagina, as you want. From this moment until the day I die, this is all yours. It's got some miles on it, but you'll never find another one just like it, or anything nearly as good. Why did I feel like I was buying a used special edition Mustang? It also means that those skanky bitches down at your bank and working in your office will have to keep their hands off of you, she snapped. But I'm not really worried because once you get some of this, you'll forget all about them. I picked Ivy up in my beloved Mustang at 7 p.m. I'd seen Ivy countless times over the last few weeks, but I never saw her look so beautiful. She was positively glowing. She was wearing a very short black dress that emphasized her legs and her ass. Every man in the restaurant looked at her when she walked in. Several dropped their forks or choked on their drinks. All of the women shot angry glances her way, even the ones who were supposed to be her friends. We got a secluded booth in the back. We started the evening demurely seated across from each other, but as the night wore on, Ivy moved closer to me until she was practically sitting in my lap. "Are you nervous?" she asked me. "Of course not," I said. "Why would I be?" "God's men are such idiots," she said. "You're sitting there happy as hell and relaxed, because this is a sure thing. You know that you're going to get some pussy, so everything is right in your little world. Ivy, I'll give you a one-time free pass. If you think you made a mistake, we can go back to being friends," I said. She looked at me as if I had slapped her. She reached between her rock-hard nipples and pulled out the locket from 6 years ago. Opening it, she pulled out a yellowed slip of paper. "Over the past 6 years, this has been my greatest treasure," she said. "I don't even have a clue how many men have come and gone through my life, but not one of them ever made me feel the way these 4 words do. I feel like I've been waiting forever for my life to start, and tonight it begins. Nothing will ever be the same after tonight." I picked up the dessert menu and started looking at the selection of cakes. "Check, please," screamed Ivy. The tone in her voice left no doubt as to why we needed a check. Again, several of the men in the restaurant reacted. I think they all wanted to be in my shoes. Ivy was right. That night changed everything. When we were together before, I thought I loved Ivy. Now I was sure I did. I didn't let myself think that sex with Ivy would be any different than with any other woman. A lot of the time, we build something up in our minds until the reality of the thing can never equal the fantasy. I was wrong. We ran into my house and up the stairs to the bedroom. Ivy was dragging me like her life depended on it. She bent over the edge of my bed, raised her dress up, and said, "Fuck me." I just laughed at her. I stood her back up, pulled her dress back down, and hugged her. I thought her eyes would cross. Then I kissed her. It was a very gentle and tentative kiss. The next one was more intense, and the one after that I slipped my tongue between her lips. Ivy just sagged down in front of me. I gently put my hand on the back of her head and wouldn't stop kissing her. She was making little whining sounds in the back of her throat, as if she was about to come just from me kissing her. I started gently rubbing her sides and back and felt her knees wobbling. I moved her over to the bed and we continued kissing there. After a while, I stood her up and slowly pulled the dress off of her. She kicked off her shoes and sat next to me. I started massaging her even more and kissed my way down from her lips to her breasts. "There's not much there, baby. Let's fuck," she said. "I've never been more ready." I rubbed and caressed Ivy's buds. Her nipples elongated and got huge. Her eyes were staring at me in shock. "Tim, what are you doing to me? My titties are tingling," she said. "And my—" By that time, I had started licking and nipping my way down to Ivy's vagina. She was shaved except for a small patch of hair at the top. I teased her with my tongue. "Tim, what are you doing?" she asked. As my tongue got near her outer lips, she started bucking her hips. My tongue had barely touched her inner lips and her legs started wobbling uncontrollably. "Tim!" she screamed. My tongue neared Ivy's elongated clit and she slammed her legs over my ears and screamed. I tasted a gush of musky fluid but kept licking around her clit. "Oh shit, Tim!" she screamed. "Don't do that again!" Then I sucked her clit and nipped at it with my teeth. She exploded again. She grabbed my head and pulled me up to her, licking her fluids off of my face. By this time, I was ready for her. I knew there was no need to be cagey about it. I slowly pushed my condom-covered dick through her opening. Ivy was bucking and pushing against me with every inch. I had to force her to keep her hips from moving. "Slow down, baby. Let's get to know each other," I said. "There's no need to rush. We've been waiting for this for a long time. We have all night. Let's enjoy it." I started to just slowly and very easily push into her and pull all the way back out. The feeling I received was not what I was expecting. Ivy's vagina was nearly as tight as a fist. It almost seemed like there were ridges inside of it that massaged me with every stroke. The faster I moved, the more the sensation until we were sliding back and forth against each other so fast it felt like little electric shocks all along my sensitive organ. Ivy was screaming until she was hoarse. She moved her hips in ways I never thought was humanly possible. As wild as my dreams of having sex with Ivy were, the reality exceeded the fantasy by far. I could see why men would risk their marriages for a shot at her. Sex with Ivy was a truly magical thing. After the first one, Ivy sucked me quickly back to life, and we started again with her on top. Ivy did things that strippers can't do in their lap dances, and I wanted to fill her up with everything I had. "Tim," she said quietly, "please take that thing out of me." "Ivy, are you tired already?" I asked. I was really close to finishing again, and I wanted to. "Not your dick, baby, the rubber," she said. "Fuck me bareback, I need to feel you." I pulled her lips down onto mine and tried to suck the life out of her. At the same time, I grabbed her ass, as much of it as I could, and started to slam myself upwards into her. She started meeting me with every thrust, and soon, all you could hear was the sound of our bodies loudly slapping against each other, and Ivy's screams. The springs and the wood of the bed frame squeaked in accompaniment as well. Finally, Ivy let out a howl like a dying cat, and I exploded again into the condom. She collapsed onto me, kissing me. I started rubbing her ass, marveling at the way the flesh jiggled. "Oh no," she said. "You said we have all night. What are you doing to me?" A short time later, we were back at it, slowly and lazing moving against each other, while staring into each other's eyes. I think we were still trying to move as we fell asleep. Very early the next morning, I woke up to an unfamiliar sensation. I know you think she was giving me a blowjob, but you're wrong. The sensation I felt was like small drips of water on my hand. Since I had both morning wood and a fierce need to pee, that dripping water woke me up quickly. She turned when she felt me move. "Ivy, why are you crying?" I asked. "I thought you wanted last night to happen." She just turned and looked at me and ran into the bathroom, crying even louder. I gently opened the door and went in. While I handled my plumbing duties, I looked at Ivy. She was standing in front of the sink, staring at herself in the mirror. I turned on the shower and pulled her naked body in with me. I tried to kiss her and she turned her face away from me. She did let me hug her, but she started crying again. I soaped her up and scrubbed her. I will admit I spent a lot of time rubbing her ass clean. It got a smile from her, but still no words. Finally, I pulled her out of the shower and dried her off. I gave her one of my old shirts and a pair of socks to put on. We went downstairs and I made her coffee and a big cup of tea for me. I led her out to my porch swing so we could talk. "Ivy, what's wrong?" I asked. "What the fuck did you do to me?" she snapped. She was starting to cry again. "Ivy, you've had sex lots of times. I told you we might not be good together. I told you there was a danger of us building this up to be more than it is. For God's sake, it was only sex. Let's not tear everything apart because you're unhappy." I looked at her again. "Ivy, why don't we chalk this up as a mistake and go back to friendship?" I said, trying to save something of the relationship. "As if I could after that," she snapped. "Tim, I haven't ever felt anything like that ever in my life. I've been fucked a lot of times, but nobody has ever done that to me. You played my body like a fucking guitar. I just feel like I've wasted my whole life. If I hadn't been so stupid, you and I would be married and my last 3 babies would be yours. And we'd be doing this every goddamn night," she said. "I just felt so loved." "Ivy, we didn't fuck last night. We made love. 2 people who love each other coming together and sharing their bodies is a little bit more than just fucking," I said. Then she turned away from me. "Tim, you hurt me pretty bad too," she said. "How did I hurt you, Ivy?" I asked. "You got me all hot and bothered, and I really wanted to feel you," she said. "So I asked you to take off that condom and come inside me. I wanted it really bad, but you just started fucking me harder until I just lost my mind again and made me forget," she said. "When I woke up this morning, I realized what you'd done, and I tried to figure out why, but all of the reason I come up with are bad," she said. "Either you think I have some kind of disease that you don't want to catch, or you just don't want to risk having a baby with the town whore and being tied to me for a long time. As much as you love my kids, you don't want to give me one of your own." She looked up at me and asked, "Which one is it, Tim?" "Honestly, Ivy, I love you, but it's both and you missed one," I said. You have fucked a lot of guys and I don't know whether or not you have a disease. We should both get tested today. I really haven't known you long enough or well enough yet to have a baby with you. And if we do last long enough to get married, we'll have at least 3 more. But I don't want to be just another guy who knocked you up and ran out on you. I want to make sure we work before I add any more stress to your life. What's the last one? She asked. I'm still not sure you won't break my heart again, Ivy, I said to her. You know I love you very much. But if I give you my heart totally and you broke it again… Tim, I swear to you that will never happen, she said, hugging me. After last night, I would never risk losing what we just did. And the thought of you doing that with any other woman would make me crazy. She was smiling now and pulled her legs up onto the swing so it was obvious that she still didn't have any panties on. Do you know that last night was the first time for a lot of things, she said. Every guy I've ever been with just pulled up my dress, fucked me and left, like they were embarrassed to be with me, and it was always so quick and dirty and nasty. But last night was just so beautiful, and no one has ever, put their mouth down there, she said. Never? I asked. Never, she echoed. But they all think of me as some dirty, nasty slut. Why would they want to kiss or put their mouth where so many other men have stuck their dicks? Only someone who loved me would do that. No doubt about it, Ivy and I were in love. The next 3 years zoomed by. Ivy never cheated on me, or at least I never caught her, and we settled into a nearly idyllic life. There was only one fly in the ointment, Jasmine. Over those same 3 years, Jazz blossomed into the most beautiful woman in town. At 20 years old, Jazz was halfway through her degree in what else math, following in my footsteps and doing well. She had a job part-time as my assistant and her own Mustang. I love her so much, it was crazy. All of Ivy's other kids called me Dad, even though we'd never gotten married, but Jazz called me Tim. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that Jazz and Ivy's relationship had taken a turn for the worse over the years until they couldn't stand to be in the same room with each other. Jazz had moved out 16 months ago and moved into the apartment over my garage. She was as much of a recluse as I'd been before I first met Ivy. My daughter was simply weird. She had all of Ivy's best features and more. As I've said before, her ass wasn't as big as Ivy's, but it was shaped the same. Her breasts were much larger. I can't overstate how beautiful Jazz was. That was part of the problem. As far as I knew, Jazz had never been on a date. Many of the boys on campus had tried. I had even schooled a few of them on her likes and dislikes, in hopes of 1 or 2 of them getting a shot. She shot them all down, hard, far harder than necessary, as if she was trying to prove something. People around the campus started thinking Jazz might be a lesbian, and a particularly bitter one. Jazz shot the women down even harder. Finally, people just left her alone. The only person she got along with was me, and she treated me like shit sometimes too. If I'd gotten my head out of my ass and analyzed her behavior, I might have known what was wrong, but I never did. Ivy still lived in her house, and I in mine, but we often stayed over at one place or another. The kids also had a habit of sleeping in either house whenever they wanted, which solved our space problems. Most mornings, Jazz and I would sit in my porch swing and have tea together before we drove into work. We both drove our Mustangs, and even though my car is faster, Jazz drives like a fucking kamikaze pilot, so the drives were always fun. I cherished our mornings together. I felt like she truly was my daughter, even though I wasn't her sperm donor. The only mornings we didn't spend together were the mornings after Ivy stayed over or I stayed over at Ivy's. I tried to get them together several times, but Jazz simply wouldn't do it. You and Ivy need your time together, she said several times. That was another sign I missed. The way she spit out her mother's name like the word Ivy tasted like shit on the way out. Life has a way of going in a circle. Several themes seem to keep repeating through our lives. Anyway, I had just turned down a chance at being the dean of the math program back at the state university, which would have given me even more money. I really didn't need the money. I was happy with my life. I'd also decided that it was time to really make my relationship with Ivy official. I wanted to marry her and legally adopt all of the kids. I wanted to do it in a big flashy family ceremony. I felt touchy talking about it with Jazz. She and I had a meeting of the minds on a similar subject the first summer that I'd moved back. Ivy had called me and asked me to pick Jazz up from school and bring her home. When I got to her house, Ivy was worried. She was seated at one end of her porch. Her mother was in the middle, and I guy who was somewhere between our age and her mother's was at the far end of the porch. I never let him in the house, she said. I didn't even let him get out of his fucking car until my mom got here. I was never alone with him. Ask Mom. You know she won't lie. Ivy, I believe you, I said. The man walked over to me. He had a slight limp, and he looked at Ivy several times. He reached out to shake my hand. You must be Tim, he said. I've heard a lot about you. Thanks for doing my job, he said sadly. You're a fucking nobody, said Jazz, walking right past him and into the house. I suddenly knew who he was. Hold that thought, I said. I went into the house and after Jazz. She was calmly sitting at the table doing her homework. She looked up and smiled as I came in. Aren't you worried about Mom and Brian? She asked. You know how she is. Right now I'm worried about you, I said. Jazz, don't you even want to meet him or talk to him? You are his, I began. I'm not his anything, she said loudly. In the blink of an eye, her whole demeanor changed. I'm yours, Tim. You're stuck with me. I'm almost 18 fucking years old, and this is the first time I've ever seen that bastard. From the first day I met you, you've always been there for me. Even when you and Mom broke up. Even when you lived in a different town, you were more a part of my life than he was. I belong to you, not him. Then she went back to doing her homework. I'm having trouble understanding sinusoidal equations when you're done with them, she said as I left. When I got back on the porch, it was strange. Ivy was trying to stay as far away from Brian as she could. It was like he had some kind of disease that only she knew about. Ivy's mom was smiling, and Brian looked like if it was possible, he'd have just disappeared out of embarrassment. Brian, I'll talk to her. Why don't you give her some time to get used to the idea? Give me your phone number and I'll have her call you, I said. He wrote down a number and handed it to me. I'll start trying to send you some money for back child support, Ivy, he said. Don't bother, Brian. The only thing I need from you is absence, she said. Anyway, since that time I knew beyond any doubt that Jazz considered herself my daughter, as much as I did. Too bad I was wrong. This time around, though, I got a chance to actually buy the ring I wanted to give Ivy. I had to get her mom to look at it with me, though, because Jazz refused to. She was as angry as ever, and even called me a poor sucker when I mentioned it. I was trying to find a good place to hide the ring when it happened. I was in Ivy's house, and the kids were all out playing or visiting friends. I thought that Ivy was working. I didn't know that she was home. I was going to hide the ring at Ivy's house because that's where the party was going to be. The phone rang, and on a reflex, I picked it up. I must have picked it up at the exact time that Ivy did because no one knew that I was listening. Hey, baby, what are you doing? Said a male voice. What the fuck do you want, Harry? Asked Ivy. I want not to tell poor old Tim about you fucking that truck driver last week, said Harry. That would surely mess up your happy little life, wouldn't it? You weren't even working there when it happened, she snapped. How did you find out? Well, the other guys that you fucked to keep it quiet had such a good time fucking you that they told a few other guys around town about it. A lot of the guys around here have really missed you, Ivy, and have been waiting for a chance to have fun with you again. We all want you to be happy with your family and your man, but we want to be happy too. So as long as you keep us happy, we stay quiet. There was silence for a while. Don't you ever miss the old days, Ivy, when you had as many dicks as you could count, instead of the same old guy fucking you the same old way, night after night after night? No, I don't, Ivy said, but her voice was weakening. No matter how good the guy is, said Harry, you need to try a few others just as a comparison, and no one guy will ever be enough for you, baby. This will be special, something even you've never done before. 15 guys, one after another, 2 or 3 at a time. And when it's over, all of this goes away. No one will ever know, especially not Tim. Believe me, none of us want Tim to find out. That guy would beat the shit out of all of us one after another over you. He's crazy about you. I think he's a little psychotic, wanting to keep you all to himself. A woman like you should be shared and appreciated by everybody. You're like a national treasure. So just the one time, and I promise this is over. He never found out about the trucker or about the guys you fucked to keep them quiet about the trucker. So he won't find out about this either. Okay, said Ivy quietly. With that one quiet word, she ended our life together. I don't know how long I stood there, unable to react. I'm sure that I continued to breathe and my heart kept beating. I'm sure that blood continued to flow through my arteries and veins, but it sure as hell didn't feel like it. A few minutes later, Ivy came out of her room and turned white as she saw me standing there. In a few seconds, she recovered her equilibrium and came over and hugged me. "Hi, honey. You scared the shit out of me. I didn't know you were here. I came home early because we weren't very busy at the store, but they just called me back in." "Ivy, don't go back to work," I said. "Call them back and tell them you can't come. Stay here with me. We really don't need the money, and we don't have very many chances to be alone without the kids." "Tim, you're so sweet. Even after all of this time, I love you with all of my heart, but this isn't about the money. I have you to take care of me and my kids now. This is about being part of a team and helping out. We have a very small staff at the store, so sometimes we all have to pitch in. Besides, I was supposed to work today anyway." She still hadn't taken her arms from around me. She gave me an added little squeeze and pressed herself to me. I reached around and cupped that big ass, knowing it would be the last time. "Ooh," she moaned. "Somebody wants some, but he's gonna have to wait until tonight after the party." She reached up and tried to kiss me, but I avoided her lips by turning my cheek. "Tim, don't be angry with me. We have the rest of our lives to be together. One afternoon won't mean shit. I love you, doofus. Besides, now you get a chance to see how it feels to be the one who's horny and having to wait until someone else gets home." She swatted me on the butt and started walking towards the door. "Maybe we can grab a quickie after I get home and shower," she said as she left. I guess I should have confronted her right then. I should have done the macho thing and just told her that I'd heard her on the phone, and if she left the fucking house, we were done, forever. What good would it have done me? I didn't need a woman that I couldn't trust. That was why I tried to get her to stay with me. If Ivy had stayed here with me, it would have meant that she put us first. I'd have tried really hard to forgive her and work our way past what had happened, because I really did love her. But at the same time, she knew what the ground rules were going into this relationship. I called the college and the university. I'd gone through this before. The dean at the university wasn't even surprised when we spoke. It was harder dealing with the dean at the community college. I had to explain that I really hadn't expected it and didn't want to do this to them, but the situation in my personal life made it necessary for me to leave town. I guess in a town as small as ours, word gets around and everybody knows everybody. "Why the fuck can't Ivy leave town this time?" snapped the dean. "The staff and the students here all love you. If you change your mind, there will always be a place here for you." I had been renting out the house that Colleen and I lived in to students during the school year. Luckily, it was summer and the house was vacant now. At least I had a place to stay. I needed to try to explain to my kids. I had to make myself stop thinking of them that way. No, I didn't. I had been a part of their lives for far longer than any other man had. Fuck it, they were my kids too, and I had to explain to them that even though their mother and I wouldn't be together anymore, they could always count on me for anything they needed. I knew that Michael and Rose would be hurt the most. The three youngest kids were still young enough to bounce back pretty quickly. Oh God, what about Jazz? Ivy and I both thought that my leaving the first time was partially what made Jazz so bitter and angry. I was the only person that got to see the true Jazz and how sweet she could be. I knew I was going to have to spend some time with her to explain this. But Jazz is a grown woman now. She'll be 21 in just a few weeks. She's been living by herself in the garage apartment since she was 18. She'd just have to understand that sometimes things don't work out the way you want them to. The person I felt the worst for was Ivy's mom. It just seemed like that poor woman was always the fallback person who had to pitch in and take care of Ivy's mess. I spent most of the afternoon packing. I was only taking the most essential things for a couple of reasons. First was that I was planning on coming back with a truck to move most of my things. This wouldn't be like last time when I had simply moved my clothing and personal items. This time I knew I'd never live in this house again. I was leaving the house to Jazz. Maybe she could let Michael or Rose take over her garage apartment. The second reason was the true one. The fact of the matter was that there was no way I could get very much stuff in my Mustang's trunk anyway. I headed over to Ivy's house for the meeting I dreaded. Ivy's mom had rounded up the older kids for me. I sat them down on the couch and explained to them that I was moving out of town to take another job. Their reactions were completely not what I was expecting. Jasmine surprised me the most. I expected her to be upset or to hug me and tell me she understood and would miss me, but she just smiled, grabbed her keys and left. "It's about fucking time," she said. I was really shocked. I guess I'd always thought that Jasmine, more than any of the other kids, would be hurt by me leaving again. But maybe she was more like me than I thought. In the back of my mind, I'd always expected Ivy to fail. Maybe Jazz has always expected me to leave again. Michael's reaction was the worst. He was fighting to hold back his tears. His grandma quickly hugged him and told him that I wasn't running out on him. I just couldn't be with his mom anymore. "Why?" he kept asking. "Mom has probably started fucking around again," said Rose. "My God, these kids grow up fast," I thought. We spent the next 40 minutes or so talking about what I was going to do and when. We also set up a schedule of regular visits for them to come to visit me and for me to come and visit them. We talked about things they really wanted to do during the summer and places they wanted to visit. We also talked about what we'd do with the younger kids. I gave them each a new cell phone with my number programmed into it and told them they could call me anytime, day or night. The phone that I was about to give to Jazz, I gave to Ivy's mom. In the middle of our conversation, the door blew open. "Hey, why don't I smell the food on the grill?" said Ivy, smiling. Michael and Rose just glared at her. "Tim was giving us new phones so we can keep in touch with him, Mom," sneered Rose. "He gave Granny the one he was going to give Jazz, but I'm sure he'll get her one later." "I don't need one," said Jazz, stepping back into the house. "Jazz, I know you're weird," said Michael, "but last time Tim left, you cried for weeks. Don't be stupid because you're pissed off as usual." "Why are you talking about when Tim left?" asked Ivy. No one acknowledged her question. Rose was looking at her mom and shaking her head. Michael was sniping at his older sister. He was clearly taking some of his anger out on Jazz to show that he was upset about me leaving. Jazz understood her brother's feelings, so she was gentle with him. Instead of lashing back at him, like she was known for, she calmly spoke to him. They both ignored Ivy. "Michael," said Jazz quietly, "what I meant when I said that I don't need Tim to give me a cell phone was for 2 reasons. Number 1, Tim gave me an iPhone like his last Christmas. And more importantly, I don't need a phone, and I'm not upset because I'm going with him." That was the straw that broke the camel's back and started everyone screaming. Ivy started crying and asking why I was leaving. Tim and Rose started screaming about why they couldn't come if Jazz was. I think I was the most shocked. I had no idea what Jazz was talking about. Rose quieted everyone down by yelling, "Shut up," at the top of her lungs. "Can we all just sit down and quietly discuss this like adults?" she asked. It was strange to hear that from a girl who was barely 16. "Tim, what are they talking about?" asked Ivy in tears. "Jesus, Mom," said Rose. "You came home with your hair all messed up. You've got bruises on your arms and legs, and you know what you smell like. It's obvious what you've been doing, so don't act surprised. People around town have finally stopped calling us names and making fun of us. And now you go and start again," said Michael. "Tim, I'll call you tomorrow. Thanks for the phone. As soon as you get the house fixed up, can I come and visit?" Michael left, slamming the door loudly. "Oh shit, that would be funny," cackled Rose. "What if Mike and me and all of the other kids all went to live with Tim?" she laughed. "At least we'd get a fresh new start in a place where nobody judged us by our mother." "Rose, what the fuck are you talking about?" asked Ivy. "Come on, Mother. You're not that stupid, are you? For the past 3 years, we've been really happy. We've been a family. We had a mother who loved us, and a father who did too. Mom, do you even know how big your balls have to be to step in and take on a woman with 6 kids? Ivy nodded her head and looked at me. She started to inch her way closer to me. Strangely enough, Jazz moved between us. And Rose wasn't done with Ivy either. She started talking to Ivy again in an even louder voice. "Mom, how many men do you think would be willing to actually marry the town slut? Sorry, Dad, but Granny can't keep a secret for shit. She even showed me a picture of the ring." "Mom, you didn't just fuck your own life up. You messed things up for all of us. So, I really hope it was worth it. Yep, you got your freak on. You had, what, an hour's worth of some guy humping on you? In exchange for that, your kids lose their dad. That seems like a good trade to me. But what do I know? I'm not an adult yet. I hope Jazz does go with him. Somebody around here should be happy." Rose got up and went into her room. Ivy fell down on the floor and started crying even louder. Her mother tried to comfort her and looked at me questioningly. "Please call me tomorrow. There are some things we need to talk about," she said. I nodded and headed for the door. I stopped when I heard Jazz behind me. "Jazz," I said loudly. "Tim," she replied. "You can't come with me," I said. "I'm an adult, Tim. I can do whatever I want, and you agreed 3 years ago when Brian came to see me that I was yours. Let's get out of here. You don't want to see me driving in the dark," she said, stepping around me and heading out the door. As I stood there, I wondered just what had happened. Jazz had lived here all of her life. How bad did things have to be for her to choose to go with me to a place she'd never even seen and leave her whole family behind? I looked at her grandmother, who simply nodded and said, "We'll talk tomorrow." I remember thinking that she probably expected for Jazz to convince me to give Ivy another chance when I calmed down. Well, she'd be wrong. Ivy and I were done. Actually, it turned out to be me who was wrong. Jazz had no intention of doing anything as far as Ivy was concerned, and her grandmother knew it. Jazz and I got into our cars and drove away. I could hear Ivy's howls even after I shut the door. A few minutes after we hit the freeway, my cell phone rang. I put it in hands-free mode and heard Jasmine talking to me through the car's speakers. "Tim, I know you're depressed about losing the woman you thought was the love of your life, but can we bump it up a nickel?" she asked. "Jazz, we're already doing 75, I replied. 80 is my comfort speed, she laughed. "Jazz, I really need to think," I said. "I have a lot on my mind." "Absolutely fuck that," she snapped. "What you want to think about is some frigging way you can take Ivy back and still hold on to your pride. Well, you can't. Game over. It's time to move on with our lives. Maybe a couple of years down the line, we can come back for a barbecue and talk about old times. But for now, Tim, let it go." "It's hard, Jazz. It hurts so much," I said. "Tim, can we stop at a store? I need to get some cheese," she said. "A big block of cheese to go with your wine. Tim, you want to know what's hard? I'll tell you. Try finding the man you want at a relatively young age and knowing he's the perfect guy for you. As you get older, both men and boys start hitting on you because of the way you look or the way you're built. Even old men are sniffing around you because they think you're like your mother. Imagine that before you even get breasts, boys are rubbing their crotches around you. How would that feel?" Rose talked about it, but she didn't begin to tell you how bad it feels to be branded a slut, not because of the way you act, but because of the way your mother does. I had no idea that Jazz and Rose had been subjected to that. Her voice got even colder as she continued. "Then throw in the fact that that one guy that you've been waiting for all this time doesn't know about it. While everyone else has treated you like you're a woman forever, he still treats you like you're two. Then finally, you're old enough to do what you want, and he looks right past you and goes after some slut. It's like a bad high school movie where the smart, cute girl gets totally ignored by the handsome quarterback. Then he totally blows her off for some skanky cheerleader. Tim, I don't have to imagine it because that's my life. Throw in the fact that while I waited for the quarterback to get his head out of his ass, every loser who sees me hits on me." "Jazz, I'm so sorry," I said. "I never knew you were interested in any guy. If I had, I'd have helped you to get him. You could have tutored nearly all of the guys on the football team in math, especially those two quarterbacks. They were dumber than stumps. Which one of them did you like? Is that why you were so eager to come with me? I think they both go to the state university, so you'll have your shot." "Tim, shut up and drive," she snapped. We stopped off and got a pizza when we hit town because there'd be no time to cook that evening. We also got tea and some frozen waffles for breakfast in the morning. The next few days we'd spend getting the house ready and relaxing. Sometime next week, I'd report to the university to start getting oriented to my new job. We also needed to decide what to do about Jazz. I'd already decided that if she really wanted to stay, she could be my assistant here as well, or go out and get her own job. Of course, she could also take some classes and get more education or just lay around the house and be my daughter for a while. We both would need time to adjust to the changes in our lives. I opened the door to the house and knew right away that we'd be doing a lot of cleaning. The college kids who'd rented the house apparently weren't big on cleaning. We were lucky, though there wasn't much damage to anything. The electricity was still on. We'd have to call the cable company and get our TV and internet service restored, though. "Where are we sleeping?" asked Jazz. "There are 4 bedrooms," I said. You're the lady of the house. You get first pick. We're going to have to pick one to use as our office, or maybe our offices. Tim, we can share an office. That way there'd be a guest room for when my brothers and sisters visit us. Maybe we should think about having 2 guest rooms, she said. That would be really nice, I said. But we really need an office. We could have both, she smirked. It went totally over my head. I looked at Jazz and she just started shaking her head. I took a shower and threw on some running shorts and a t-shirt. The stress of the day had me starving and ready for bed. When I came out of the bathroom, Jazz was dressed similarly. She was sitting on a bar stool in the breakfast nook, stuffing a big piece of pizza in her mouth, and all I saw was miles of bare leg. As depressed as I was, I still noticed how tiny her shorts were. She had one of my old t-shirts on and had it tied up under her breasts. Jasmine, don't you think you should put some clothes on? I asked. Tim, you never said anything about Ivy running around you house in just one of your shirts, and most of the time she didn't even wear panties, she snapped. I'm hungry. I'm going to eat and go to bed. If you don't like what you see, don't look. Jasmine, you know I love you. I just worry about you sometimes. All I've ever wanted is for you to be happy. It's just going to take some time for me to get over the fact that you're not a little girl anymore. I sat down on the stool next to her and started eating. She smiled and took my hand. Tim, I'm always happy when I'm with you. We're going to be fine as soon as you get over Ivy. And we're going to have the best math department of any school in the state, she said. We ate the rest of our pizza and then went to bed in adjacent rooms. The next morning when I woke up, Jazz was already in the kitchen. She had made tea, which we both loved, and waffles. She was still in her tiny shorts and my shirt. She looked up at me and smiled when I came into the kitchen. Tim, you have to do the guy thing, she said. What guy thing? I asked. You know the one where we didn't buy any maple syrup for our waffles, so you taste the syrup that I found in the cabinet to see if it's still okay for me to eat, she said, smiling. I pried the top off of the bottle and poured a tiny bit onto my finger. I gently touched the tip of my tongue to it. Then I made the worst face I could and began spitting it out into the sink. Then I grabbed my throat and threw myself on the floor, gagging. Jasmine came over and looked down at me, then got on her knees over me. She was really concerned and I was shocked. When Jazz leaned over me, her breasts swung forward, pressing against the shirt. I got a glimpse of a large, dark pink nipple, and my dick immediately hardened. From her proximity to me, I was sure she could feel it, but she didn't say anything. Get up, you faker, she said, laughing. That smile was worth it, I told her, but the syrup really does taste pretty bad. Awful, in fact. Oh, crap. I already made the waffles, she said. I loved this. Jasmine was her old self again. Whatever it was that had turned her into the evil Jazz was over. I wished that it could have ended while we were all happy. Maybe good Jazz was just an act, because she was worried about my depression. I grabbed a couple of waffles off the platter and poured syrup over them. I stuck a corner of one into my mouth as Jazz watched with her mouth open. I thought you said the syrup was bad, she said. I just said that because I didn't think there was enough syrup left for both of us, I laughed. That's why I'm glad you made my plate first, she said, snatching the plate and heading for the back porch. I ran after her. Tim, if you bring my tea, maybe I'll share with you, she said. We ended up sitting on the back porch together with her feeding us both. Tim, how much money do we make? She asked. More than enough, I said. Why? Do we make enough to do a few home improvements? She asked. Probably. What did you have in mind? I asked again. We're probably going to live here for a while, right? She asked. I nodded my head. I'm not going back there, except to visit the kids. This is probably going to be home for a long time for me. Well, I see a nice deck that we can relax on and a pool. It would be so cool for when the kids come to visit us, she said. Okay, I like the idea too. We'll start looking for contractors as soon as we get the essentials taken care of, I said. She smiled again. The next few weeks flew by and soon we were into the summer. Jazz and I were starting to get ready for beginning our first fall semester in my new position, but we still had months before September rolled around and classes would begin. We had spoken to the kids several times but hadn't been back for a visit yet. I still had not yet remembered to call Ivy's mother yet either. Jazz had found the contractor she wanted a few weeks ago, and the pool had been dug and installed. Any day now, the deck surrounding it would be finished. Jazz had been looking for deck furniture for about a week and hadn't yet found what she was looking for. Things had become really interesting between us. I'd gotten used to her lack of clothing around the house. I was, however, glad that she seemed to wear a lot more when the contractors or other people were around. But when it was just the two of us, she was practically naked. Often when we shopped or went out to eat, people told us we were a lovely couple. I usually corrected them by telling them she was my daughter. "No, I'm not," Jazz would say. So after a while, I just gave up and went with the flow. Jazz didn't seem to suffer from homesickness or miss her family too much. In fact, I think that I missed them more than she did. One evening in late June, things began to change. There was a big thunderstorm in the middle of the night. The thunder crashed loudly and I could hear the sounds of a tree struck somewhere in the woods near our house. The next thing I knew, the door to my bedroom flew open and Jazz came into my room. "Tim, I'm sleeping with you tonight," she said nervously. "The storm is a big one and I want to make sure you're not afraid." Men are naturally protectors, so in my mind I saw this as Jazz being the one who was afraid. I thought that she was afraid and didn't want to admit it. In reality, Jazz knew that I would think this, but she simply decided that I'd had enough time to get over Ivy. Another bolt of lightning ripped open the sky and Jasmine snuggled against me. "It's okay, Tim, I'll protect you," she said. Even as she said this and molded her body against me closer, I realized that Jazz was naked. Feeling her pressing her large breasts against my lower chest was causing me to react in a very unfatherly way. We'd been here for about a month now, which meant I'd gone from fucking Ivy at least once a day, and most of the time more, to nothing. Jazz didn't realize it, but she was playing with fire. I tried to move away from her and she moved even closer. "Tim, I need to tell you something," she said, taking my mind off of the situation. "Well, really, I want to thank you for everything you've done for my family over the years," she said. "Oh shit, Tim," her voice got louder. I thought that she had finally noticed how hard I was. I was sure she'd noticed since she was pressing herself against it. "We have to go back tomorrow. I forgot to tell you. Tomorrow is Michael's first game of the season. He'll be heartbroken if we're not there." I stiffened at her words. Okay, the parts of my body that weren't already stiff, stiffened. I loved Michael as if he was my own son. Of course I'd go to the game, but I wasn't prepared to see Ivy yet. The wounds were just too raw. Last time I'd only known Ivy for about 3 months when we broke up. This time I'd had 3 years of living with and loving that woman, even though on some level I'd expected it. I still hadn't been ready for it. "Don't worry, Tim, she won't be there," said Jazz. Her voice in the darkness was so close to my skin it almost felt like she was kissing me. I could feel slight gusts of air with every word she spoke, and I was sure that her nipples were becoming harder and longer, but it was probably my imagination. "If she does show up by some miracle, we'll just stay away from her, and at any rate, I'll protect you, Tim, just like I am right now. I will always be there to protect you, Tim. I'll never leave you, and I'll never hurt you the way that she did." When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I noticed was the sound of hammering. As I opened my eyes, I realized that I was in trouble. During the night, Jasmine had turned around and was now facing away from me. We were spooned together. One of my hands was holding her tight tummy. The other one was cupping one of her large breasts. The only reason my morning wood wasn't inside her was because I had shorts on, but it and my shorts were between the half globes of her ass. My only excuse was that this was the way I usually slept with her mother, but Ivy's breasts were nowhere near as large or as full as the one I was cupping now. I felt awful. I let go of her breast and heard her sigh. "So you're finally awake, huh?" she asked, as if the situation was perfectly normal. "Jazz, I'm so sorry," I began. "Tim, shut up before you say something stupid," she said. "You didn't hurt me. I know that it's not like you're going to rape me. To tell you the truth, it felt nice. I felt really loved and protected. We have a whole lot to do today, and I have to do some ordering and get something delivered." She got out of bed and just stood there in front of me. Some women look better clothed. Jasmine is not one of them. Over the past few weeks, I'd gotten used to seeing her in skimpy clothing, but to see her there in her glory took my breath away. I got hard all over again just looking at her. I suddenly realized that she'd been talking to me and I hadn't heard a fucking word of it. "Is that okay?" she asked. What did you ask me?" I asked. I just asked if we could bring Michael and Rose back with us for the weekend, she said. Only if you agree to put some clothes on while they're here, I said. Tim, do you think I'm an idiot? I wouldn't walk around like this with any other man in or around our house. Of course things will be different while we have guests, but after they're gone, we're going to have to talk, she said. I had that feeling that she was the adult here, and I was some little boy that she was scolding. But you run around like that in front of me, and look at you now, I snapped. Tim, why would I look at myself? I see it every day in the mirror, and you must like looking at me because you haven't taken your eyes off me since I got out of the bed. Your eyes must be getting dry because you haven't blinked more than twice in the last few minutes. She laughed at her own words. Besides, what's the big deal? You spent the whole night with your arms all over me. You may as well see what you've been feeling on. Tim, I'm not 18. I'll be 21 very soon. I've been considered a full-grown woman for almost 3 years. It's not illegal for you to look at what you've been touching all night. Besides, I figure it's just curiosity, right? I mean, I am built differently than Ivy is, aren't I? And if we're going to be living in the same house, there are going to be times when we see each other naked. This way it won't be awkward. She nodded her head and smiled that little smile of hers. Now get your ass out of bed. It's nearly 10 and the game starts at 2. Saturday traffic will probably be light, but I want to go to the furniture store before we hit the freeway. Jasmine hustled us out to the furniture store before we even had breakfast. She picked out a patio set and a nice big charcoal grill and had them delivered. She called the contractor who was finishing up the deck and got him to agree to set up the patio furniture before he left that day. We made one last stop at a sporting goods store and bought a bunch of pool toys and floats. Jasmine drove us back to her grandmother's house. I had my eyes closed the whole time. Jazz spent a lot of the time laughing and talking about how we should switch cars. My Mustang GT's superior acceleration and power were more suited to her driving style than her V6. When we pulled up in front of the house, I got out and kissed the ground. Rose came running out to us and laughed when she saw me. She gave me a huge hug. "Dad, I missed you so much," she said. "Why were you kissing the dirt? Do you miss home too? Are you thinking about moving back?" "No, Rosie, I'm just glad to be alive after riding with your sister for over an hour." "Tim, Granny really wants to talk to you. Come on, Jazz, let's go see the little ones." She grabbed Jasmine's arm and pulled her away. I knocked on the door and tentatively pushed it open. "Oh, just come on in. You know you're always welcome here, Tim," said Ivy's mother. She crossed the room and gave me a hug. "Tim, I know you're in a hurry to get to the game and see Michael, but you and I really need to have a talk afterwards," she said. "You haven't asked about her, so I'll tell you because I know that you want to know. Ivy is miserable. She just cries all of the time. It's been a month and all she does is cry. She gets up and goes to work and comes home and heads straight to her room. She doesn't go out. She barely eats. She's lost weight and she looks like she's aged overnight. I'm pretty sure she's pregnant again too. There's very little chance that it's yours, is there?" I shook my head, no. "I didn't think there was much chance that you would have left her if it was. Well, she made her bed. I can't worry about her forever, after seeing you. I think I'm more worried about what's going on with you, though. I may already be too late, so promise me that you'll come by and talk to me after the game," she said. "And Tim, don't bring Jasmine." The game was great. When all of the players were introduced, Jazz, Rose, and I cheered loudly when Michael was introduced. Michael looked up into the stands and saw us and swelled up with pride. The opposing pitcher was a bigger, fat kid who was mowing down and taunting all of the players he pitched to. At Michael's first turn at bat in third inning, the pitcher started leering at him and making funny faces. "Come on, Mikey, he's not a pitcher. He's a stand-up comedian, and he's not even funny," I screamed. "Tear the cover off of that ball." Michael looked up at me and nodded his head. No one had gotten on base from Michael's team yet. The pitcher was red-faced after my taunts, and he threw a wild pitch that Michael leaned away from but refused to move out of the batter's box. The next ball was a fastball. It came at Michael rapidly, but left the end of his bat even faster. Michael didn't knock it out of the park, but he knocked it so far into the outfield that by the time the fielder got the ball, he was rounding third and headed for home. As he crossed the plate, Michael's teammates all cheered and clapped for him. The pitcher's confidence was shaken, and the game turned into a rout. The pitcher had to be replaced as batter after batter started to get hits off of him. The fat kid who started out the game taunting and bullying other players ended up sitting on the bench crying. I knew I shouldn't, but I was tempted to laugh. As I looked around the bleachers, I started to notice some of the things that I hadn't before. Most of the men in our area were staring at Jasmine. Even with her long, dark hair stuffed under a baseball cap and large sunglasses obscuring her beautiful face, she was the center of attention. Every time she got up to cheer for Michael's team, jaws dropped. I guess I was used to seeing Jazz practically naked. Today she had on a pair of knee-length cut-off jeans and one of my old shirts. Under the shirt she had on a very sturdy bra, but it didn't matter. Jazz could have worn a burlap bag and her proportions would have shown. Every time she got up and pumped her fist, her ass or her boobs jiggled and the crowd went wild. I think that by the fourth inning, the whole crowd wanted Michael's team to win or make great plays just to see Jasmine get up and cheer. There was nothing I could do about them looking at her. Anyway, my concentration on the game was shifted towards a conversation going on just a few yards away from us. The fat bully was being chewed out by an adult. Since he wasn't dressed for the game, I assumed that he wasn't one of the coaches. "Why the fuck are you sitting here crying like a little bitch?" he yelled at the boy. "It's your turn to bat next. If you want to get back at them, get your fat ass over there and knock one out of the park. If you sit here and cry, you're walking home." I couldn't believe he was talking to his own kid that way. Then suddenly I saw red. The asshole of a father turned out to be Harry Prendergast, the same bastard who had pressured Ivy into destroying our life together. I was thinking about how stupid he was when I felt Jazz grab me and yank me out of the stands. "Danger, Will Robinson," she snapped. "We need to move." I looked to see where she was pointing. Only a few sections away from us and scanning the crowd was Ivy. She was looking for something or someone, probably us. Jazz and I ducked under the bleachers and moved closer to where the players were. Just as we got near the front, the fat kid got up to bat. I didn't understand why Harry had put so much pressure on the boy. His team had no one on base. It was the top of the ninth inning, and they had 2 outs. Michael's team had a 7-run lead. Even if he hit a home run and the bases had been loaded, his team was going to lose. The kid bit his lip and swung wildly at the first pitch. The ball shot off the end of his bat towards right field. Michael raised his glove and got under the ball. He backed up and sighted the ball. He moved a little to his left and the ball fell right into his glove. The crowd started cheering. The Jazz started cheering and the guys near us stopped cheering and watched her. Ivy spotted Jazz. I didn't notice because I was watching Harry, who was now only a few feet from me. "That kid beat your ass today, you loser," he screamed. "How big a loser do you have to be to get beaten by the town slut's kid? He doesn't even have a goddamn father." People near them were starting to frown as Harry continued to berate the boy. "Shut up, Harry," I said loudly. Suddenly everyone around us got quiet. "Who the fuck are you to get into my business?" he asked. "I'm the town slut's kid's goddamn father," I snapped. "Another fucking loser," he said, dismissing me. "I don't know whether to be sorry for you, thank you, or just kick your ass." Everyone in the crowd was focused on us now. "I feel sorry for you because you fell in love with a woman who was so big of a slut that she'll literally fuck anybody," he laughed. "I'm still trying to figure out which one of you is the most pathetic, her for not being able to keep her legs closed, or you for being stupid enough to love her. Why didn't you just fuck her like everybody else? I guess I should thank you, though, because me and 14 of my friends got to hit that pussy, and once we got started, she was loving it. So thanks, loser. Now run along before I kick your pathetic ass. Or did you come here to beg me to fuck her again for you?" Before Harry even registered that I had moved, my fist rocketed into his nose. His head snapped back and blood was everywhere. Harry was a few inches taller than me and a lot fatter, but it didn't help him. I was enraged. After the first punch, I buried my fist in Harry's fat gut, causing him to double over. Then I kneed him in the face and started kicking him when he fell. It took several of the parents and coaches to get me off of him. When I came back to my senses, the first thing I noticed was Jazz pulling me towards the car and Ivy standing across from me crying. Ivy started moving towards me, but Jasmine got between us and held up her hand for Ivy to stop. "Ivy, there's been enough stupidity here already. Leave him alone or these people are going to see another fight," she warned. Trust me, I have plenty of reasons to want to beat your ass. Ivy went into shock. She just stood there watching Jazz pull me into the car. She went over and spoke to Michael and Rose before they left. Apparently, she was upset because no one had told her about Michael's game today, or that Jazz and I would be here. She'd had to hear it from a customer at the store. Jazz drove away as Ivy just stood there watching us. Jazz drove me to her grandmother's house and then left to go to Ivy's house to see Michael and Rose. I knocked again and walked into the living room. Ivy's mom was on the phone as I walked in. She hung up the phone and smiled at me. "Now we have even more things we need to talk about," she said. "That boy has been picking on Michael for years. It was time he got his. And Harry is a well-known asshole. No one is looking for you. A couple of the sheriff's deputies were there and can vouch for the fact that Harry provoked you. What I want to know is one thing. Were you defending Michael or Ivy, or just getting some revenge for the role Harry played in messing up your life?" I shrugged my shoulders. I hadn't actually thought it through. I'd just been pissed. She sat down on the couch and gestured for me to sit next to her. "Tim, I wanted us to talk because you're the nicest man I know. I've heard that you're some kind of mathematical genius, but when it comes to the women in this family, you're a moron. I wanted to warn you, but from what I'm hearing, it's probably too late." "I haven't spoken to Ivy since I left here a month ago," I said. "There's no need to warn me about Ivy. There's no chance of us getting back together. She's broken my heart for the last time. Maybe if she had come to me after the first guy, the trucker, we might have fixed this. But then she went and fucked the other guys to keep the first time quiet, and then the gangbang to keep that time quiet. Where would it have ended?" I heard a sniffle behind me. I turned and saw Ivy. I was too far along to stop, so I kept talking. "I loved Ivy with all of my heart, but it just didn't seem to matter. I guess I'm only human. I can't keep up with the amount of sex she needs. Maybe she just got bored with me, but it doesn't matter. She can do whatever she wants to do now." "Tim, I was never bored with you," said Ivy. "You do things to me that no other man has ever come close to. I love you. The thing with the truck driver ... it just happened. I'll regret it forever, but I was not in control of myself. The other guys blackmailed me into doing something because I knew you'd leave me. I had no choice. I'd do anything to keep us together. I love you." "There's always a choice, Ivy," I said. "You just made the wrong one." "So, is this what you wanted to warn me about?" I asked Ivy's mom. "I didn't want to warn you about Ivy," she said. "I wanted to warn you about Jasmine." "Jazz is fine," I said. "If it wasn't for her, I'd probably not be doing as well as I am now." "So is she pregnant yet?" asked her grandmother. "It would be funny to have both of them pregnant at the same time." "Of course not," I snapped. "Jasmine hasn't even dated anyone. She never leaves the house without me." "Good Lord, you are a moron," said Ivy's mother. "I guess I need to fill you in on your whole goddamn life, don't I? Tim, just before you left the first time, you had figured out that even though you thought that you and Ivy were a couple, she was still fucking a bunch of guys around town, right?" I nodded. "Well, your male pride was hurt, and you ran out of town with your tail between your legs to get over your hurt. Now, whether you know it or not, Ivy really did and does love you, but she's just never been able to say no to a dick. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. What you should have done was kick the door down, beat that guy's ass like you beat Harry's today, and then beat Ivy's ass too. You should have told her in no uncertain terms that she was your woman, and you would not tolerate her fucking around on you. But that wouldn't be you, would it, Tim? You were hurt, so you ran off and married some other woman. Ivy was so hurt that she ended up sleeping with a bunch more losers and had even more kids that no one will claim except you." She shook her head. "Well, just before you left, you probably don't remember this, but you had a talk with Jasmine. She was only a little girl then, but she told you that if she was your girlfriend, she wouldn't be a slut. Do you remember that?" I smiled and nodded. So did Ivy. "When you left, you and Ivy were so consumed by your own feelings in each other that neither of you considered Jasmine. To your credit, Tim, you kept your word, just like you're doing with the other kids now. You did way more for Jasmine than I've ever seen a man do for a child, especially one that isn't his. Tim, I know in your mind you're running all of that noble bullshit about you being as much those kids' father as their sperm donors are, because you're the one who's been there for them when they were happy or sad or sick or in trouble. Believe me, I'm on your side, but those rules do not apply when it comes to Jasmine." You made her the happiest little girl in the world. You always came to all of her school events and never missed her birthdays or report cards or anything. But when you came back to town just before she turned 18, things had changed. Jasmine wanted you, and not as her father. Haven't you noticed that shortly after you got back to town, she stopped calling you Daddy and started calling you Tim? I could tell that hurt you, but she was trying to tell you something and you all missed it. At the same time, she stopped getting along with her mother and started calling her Ivy. When that asshole Brian showed up, you should have noticed then. I knew, but I didn't want to stop her from being able to confide in me. She told you that she wasn't his daughter, but she also told you she was yours. She didn't ever say she was your daughter, just that she was yours. So why did she get mad at me, Mother? Asked Ivy. Neither of you idiots noticed this, but the first time you spoke on Tim's porch when he got back, Jasmine was there hiding in the bushes. She heard you ask Tim why he was back. He said he was back to make sure Jasmine in a good life or some shit like that. She interpreted it as meaning he was back for her. So when the two of you got back together, to her it was like the town slut stole her man. I think that Ivy was as shocked as I was. So what do you think we should do? I asked. I'm going to beat that girl's ass, said Ivy. It's time for her to stop playing dress up and get a life. Ivy, I'm your mother and I love you, but you are the one who's wrong here. You're an over 30 unwed mother with 6 kids, another one on the way, and a complete lack of self-control. By the time you were Jasmine's age, how many kids did you already have? You don't even know who the father of the one you're carrying now is, do you? We do know that despite what you were hoping for, it isn't Tim's baby, though I'm sure he'll love it as if it was. But it's probably going to be as an uncle, not as a dad. On the other hand, Jasmine is far smarter and more mature than you are even now, and she always has been. Jasmine is 20, almost 21 years old with a college degree. She has a great job and a home with the man she has loved all of her life. She would probably hurt you very badly if you tried to mess that up. Tim, you're the one who has to get his head out of his ass here. Let me guess. You and Jasmine haven't had sex yet, have you? Of course not, I said. She's my daughter that would... Tim, she really is not your daughter. She's started to put pressure on you, though, hasn't she? She walks around the house nearly naked, but making sure you see her, doesn't she? Pretty soon she'll be finding excuses to sleep in your bed, and then it'll be a wrap. At the same time, she's fixing your meals and making your house into a home. She's even got a job as your assistant. Jasmine has been working on you for a long time. You bought her a car. She wanted the same kind you have. The same thing with cell phones, and even when she moved out of the house at 18, where did she move Tim? I looked at the floor. I am a moron, I thought. Did she do the logical thing and move into a house only 2 streets over with her grandmother? I'd have been glad to have her. No Tim. Even though she lived over your garage and you lived in the house, in her mind she was moving in with you. Didn't you notice how much she loved it when you and she had breakfast together every morning? Or how evil that girl got when Ivy spent the night with you? Tim, every time we have a barbecue or a family event, where does Jasmine sit? She never let you and Ivy sit next to each other. If she had to move a chair from somewhere else, she always made sure that she was not only sitting next to you, but between you and Ivy. I'm as sorry as the next person that you and Ivy are over with, but I'm a practical woman, Tim. You're a great guy. Jasmine loves you, and I want to keep you in the family. I just wanted you to know what's going on around you so you can figure out what you want. But don't worry, I already know what you want. Rose told me. She also told me that Jasmine invited her and Michael to your house for the weekend. Don't you see it, Tim? Jasmine is trying to slowly get the family to see you two as a couple. I shook my head woodenly and Ivy just started crying again. Tim, I think I've given you something to think about, so now you know. And knowing is half of the battle. All you have to do now is figure out your own feelings. Oh yeah, when you do figure it out. For God's sake, don't go out and buy another engagement ring. Jasmine has been wearing the one you bought for Ivy since you left here. I left the house in a state of shock. I sat down on the porch and waited for Jasmine to retrieve me. She pulled up, screeching my tires a few minutes later and smiled at me. She got out of the car and came over and hugged me. I guess you want to drive, huh? She asked. I nodded my head. Rose and Michael were squeezed into the Mustang's tiny back seat, grinning. The drive home was really fun. The kids loved the pool and the deck and the house. We had 2 fun-filled days during which Michael announced to both Jazz and me that there were simply not enough people in our family who drove Mustangs. He volunteered to join the club when he got his license in 8 months. "It depends on your grades in school this year," said Jasmine. "If you bring me a 3.5 or higher GPA, we'll get you a used Mustang. Anything lower, and you're probably in a rice wagon. Anything lower than a 3.0, and you're on the bus." "Thanks, Mom," said Michael, joking. Sunday, we drove the kids home. I noticed a mood change as soon as we started the trip back to our house. We both missed the kids already, and were sadder. But there was a slightly different feel to us as well. While Michael and Rose had been in the house, Jasmine dressed nicely. Even her swimsuits were one-piece suits with a high neckline. As I relaxed in the den after dinner, Jasmine was back in full effect. She had one of my shirts on again with a tiny pair of panties. The shirt had only one button done and she wasn't wearing a bra. I gasped when I first saw her. It was one of those weird moments when I took a large input of air and it all seemed to pass my lungs and go to my dick. "Don't start shit that again," said Jazz. "I was very good around the kids." "Yes, you were," I agreed. "I'm going to bed," she said. "I'm exhausted." I nodded and told her, "Good night." "I love you, Jazz," I said. She smiled broadly and told me she loved me too. I watched the news, took a shower, and decided to go to bed as well. I pulled back my sheets in the darkness and got into bed. "This is my side, doofus," said Jasmine, startling me. "Jazz, why are you in my bed?" I asked. "Tim, shut up. I decided back 3 nights ago during the storm that we're sleeping together from now on. I told you that we were going to have a talk when we got back, and I know you've already spoken to my grandmother, so unless you don't want me in your bed, this is where I sleep. For a while, I'm going to let you control what we do once we're in bed, but that has limits too. And one last thing, turn on the light." I turned on the bedside lamp. Jasmine held her hand up. "This is mine," she said. "I gave you plenty of time to get over Ivy. I'm giving you 3 days to pull this ring off of my finger. If you don't, you will be contractually obligated to propose to me. Good night." As I lay down, Jasmine rolled over and snuggled up next to me. No, we didn't grab each other and make mad monkey love, but we had an understanding between us. And 4 days later, she was still wearing the ring. She called her grandmother and Rose and told them that we engaged. Everyone was happy for us, with the possible exception of Ivy, who, though she never expressed any discontent about it, wouldn't talk about it. It was necessary, though, for us to delay the wedding because Ivy lost her baby. No one knew whether she had lost the baby and then become depressed, or if she'd become depressed and then stopped taking care of herself and then lost the baby. 15 men in town all breathed a sigh of relief, though. Jasmine did finally talk to Ivy the day after Christmas. The whole family had come up to spend Christmas with us, and we'd expected Ivy to come, but she had backed out. When Jazz drove the kids back home, she stopped in to see Ivy. She later told me about their conversation. Jasmine had told Ivy that she was sorry that Ivy had missed spending Christmas with us. Ivy told her that she just couldn't bring herself to celebrate anything. Jasmine told her that she'd do anything she could to make Ivy happy again. Ivy asked Jasmine not to marry me. Jasmine told her she'd do anything except that. She told Ivy that she'd had 2 chances with me and blew them both. Ivy needed to get over it and move on with her life. We were both very happy and had nothing against her. We both loved her and the kids, and she was an important part of our family. What Jasmine never told me was that she'd told Ivy that if anything ever happened to her, she expected Ivy to take care of me. She explained to Ivy that before herself, Ivy had been the love of my life. And if anything ever happened to Jazz, I probably wouldn't be able to function. Time moves quickly when you're having fun, and several years had passed. Just after I turned 37 and Jazz was 24, we got pregnant. I was the happiest man on earth. Jazz acted like it was no big deal, and so did her grandmother. I guess it was because they had seen it happen so many times. I was used to having a bunch of little kids around the house, because Jazz and I often kept Ivy's 3 youngest kids for months at a time during the summer. Michael and Rose were both away at college and working jobs for the summer. Michael, who was getting a degree in automotive engineering, was working at an assembly plant in Flint, Michigan for the summer. It just happened to be one of the plants where they made Mustangs. Rose was working in a hospital while she earned her nursing degree. Anyway, out of all of the kids, Jasmine's baby would be my first biological child. Even her grandma was surprised by how big Jazz got. It turned out that we were having twins. Jasmine's pregnancy was difficult, and she had to stay home from work during the last 3 months. She jokingly told me that if she found out that I even looked at any of the students or staff, that she'd kill me and then them. I think she knew that there was no chance of me going after anyone else. We both knew firsthand the kind of pain that cheating can bring. "I don't want you going after any magic pussy either," said Jazz. She was joking about what the men in our old town used to call her mother. I guess losing me had finally calmed Ivy down as well. She was working hard as the manager of her old supermarket. She didn't date and spent all of her spare time with her kids. She had finally come to our house a few times and always cried. Even after years had passed, as much as she loved me and her daughter, it was just too painful for her to see us together. Jasmine did the most wonderful thing to try and heal the rift with her mother. When the twins, a boy and a girl, were born, she named our daughter Ivy Rose and our son Ivan Michael. Jazz didn't bounce back very quickly after the babies were born, and the doctors told us that she'd probably not be able to bear any more children. We didn't care because our two were perfect. Even their grandmother came to see them. Their great-grandmother loved them too. I remember it being about 6 months ago today. The twins were nearly 5 months old when their mother finally decided that I could be left alone with them while she drove to the store. She told me she'd be back in 20 minutes tops, and if I did anything stupid to her babies while she was gone, I'd never be allowed to watch them unsupervised again. Everyone in the family still sees me as some kind of kind-hearted but absent-minded professor. Jasmine had this habit of kissing me goodbye like it was the last time we ever would. She told me that Ivy had told her about the day that she went off to do her gangbang, how she had tried to kiss me and I didn't kiss her. Ivy told Jasmine that the thing she regrets most in her life, other than going to that gangbang itself, was not getting to kiss me one last time. As Jasmine headed out the door, she kissed me, and I tried to settle for just a peck. Jasmine grabbed me by the back of my head and thrust her tongue down my throat and tried to suck the life out of me. She crushed her breasts against me and ground her blue jean-covered pussy against my hardness. "Jazz, if you keep that up, I won't let you go to the store," I said. "Is having me as your sex slave all you ever think about?" she asked. "Yep," I replied. "Good answer," she said, "but I have to go or your kids will run out of Pampers before another day passes. They're full of shit, just like their father." I swatted her on her sashaying ass as she left the house. "Jazz, drive your car," I yelled after her. "Aw crap," she yelled back. When Jazz hadn't returned after a half hour, I wasn't concerned. The babies were actually fairly easy to take care of. They were sleeping anyway, so I decided to watch some TV. The news reporter, I don't remember her name, was talking about a terrible crash on the freeway near our house. A semi-truck driver who'd apparently been on the road for far beyond the legal number of hours had been keeping himself awake with copious amounts of Red Bull and energy tablets. He ran through a red light and T-boned a red Mustang. The identity of the Mustang's driver was being withheld pending notification of the family. There was no need, I thought. We know who she is. I still don't remember going to the door and letting the 2 police officers into my house. From what I understand, I did stay conscious long enough to tell them Ivy's phone number. I guess soon after that, I just blacked out. For more than a day. They tell me that I simply didn't wake up. They think that the traumatic shock of Jasmine's death caused me to retreat inside of my mind. Even when I recovered, I was just not the same. Rose often tells me that people standing right next to me and screaming at me got no response from me. She also says that I would swear that Jazz was standing in front of me telling me things about the babies, and I would answer her and laugh and talk to her. A few weeks, actually it's been 6 months now, have passed and Ivy has been here with me the whole time. She had to quit her job after missing a month in the store. She and the 3 youngest of her kids have simply moved into the house with me. Every day we do things together and Ivy takes care of my babies. I'm nearly ready to go back to work. I really need to go back to work to help me get over this, though I don't think I ever will. I'm trying to learn to live without Jasmine, but it just seems pointless. If it weren't for my twins, I don't think I'd have come back from the retreat inside of my own mind. I really believed that Jasmine was there with me, and she made me come back to take care of our babies, for both of us. So I've started to try to live again, but I'm taking it one day at a time. This brings me back to the beginning of my story and Ivy's question. Ivy just told me that she and Jasmine had once had a talk, and she'd promised Jasmine that if anything ever happened, she'd take care of me. We converted the guest room into the nursery for the babies before Jazz passed. The office is still an office, and Ivy has been sleeping on the couch. Her 3 kids are sleeping in one room. Ivy wants to convert the office into a room for her son. The 2 girls can sleep in the other room, and Ivy wants to sleep with me. It seems as if she's thinking of making this some kind of a permanent arrangement. I do have to admit that from her perspective, it seems like a good deal. She can move permanently to a new place where no one knows her and reinvent herself. She's a little bit afraid of what might happen because she loves me so much and she hasn't had sex with anyone since the gangbang. She claims to have changed, and maybe she has. Doesn't it seem to you like she's trying to get me to give her a third chance? Yep, that's the way I took it too. She told me that I need her help bringing up my babies, and she reminded me that I'm a big part of her kids' lives too. It's only natural that families should pull together to help each other. She also reminded me that she has never stopped loving me, and we have a lot of history together. Finally, she suggested that we could start out as friends and see where things go from there. So again, what would you do?